welcome to a brand new episode of Jen and Jake's Bizarre Fray. And last time on this wonderful, glorious show on this corner of the internet, we came back for the first time this year off of the back of the recommendations that Jen and I had for each other, which was my latest entry in my book series, Those Who Dwell in the Dark, and Jen's recommendation was House of Leaves in tandem with their excellent thesis on House of Leaves, which you can read if you go and watch that video right now. It's in the description. But now, here we are, because our recommendations were Stranger Things Season 5, and, of course, Dimension 20, what is it? The Unsleeping
Unsleeping City.
the Unsleeping City. And I would just like to point out that we didn't even like point this out when we did our recommendations, but we have done a decent job at having a kind of like dual kinship between our recommendations to the point where I didn't even like the Dungeons and Dragons thing went like right over my head when it came to like what we were doing last week. So I guess this is technically a very TTRPG centric episode of this show in many respects.
So, this is the first official episode of this arc. Points are on the board.
Points are on the board now.
Chaos will be had. Moves will be made. Blows will be dealt.
Oh,
Dice will be rolled, apparently. Here's a new things. We're somehow still figuring out ways to shake up things that we can talk about on this show. So I
oh yeah.
guess we should start with let's start with Dimension 20. Let's talk
Hmm.
about the new style of media that I've brought into the mix with my recommendation. So, The Unsleeping City is a particular season of Dimension 20, which is an anthology show run by Dropout with a bunch of former College Humor alumni. And it is an anthology show where each season is a different TTRPG campaign. Initially, it was strictly relegated to D&D. As the show went on, they would expand with bringing in different game systems and dungeon masters into the mix. But the season that we watched, The Unsleeping City, was very early on in their tenure when it was all Brennan Lee Mulligan and his Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition campaigns with his regular cast members, referred to through all the seasons that these 6 people appear in together as the intrepid heroes. So, to get anybody into Dimension 20, I would basically say that if you want to watch some of the best professional Dungeons and Dragons players, which is still a weird phrase to even say.
Hmm.
But those people clearly exist, and if you want to watch them, Dimension 20 is a great place to start because my history with this format is honestly mostly negative, just due to the long form nature of the big tent pole examples of this format, like Critical Role,
I was gonna
like the
say, I've gotten
Adventure
the feeling
Zone.
that you've got a little beef with Critical Role just throughout our interactions. Just
It's
like
not
we've never
even
delved into it, but I've gotten the vibe.
I don't even necessarily have beef with Critical Role. I just find the way that they execute the format so antithetical to everything I enjoy about television and long
It's
form television,
it's
which
the
is what
classic.
shows like Critical Role end up evoking the most to me, is it ends up evoking television. And if your show is just going to keep going and going and going and be overstuffed with things like that, and the live stream element of Critical Role also just completely alienates me because they've been doing it live since they've been doing it, and they just upload it with all the dead air left in.
Oh,
And
after watching Dimension 20, that sounds awful. Like I have no opinion on Critical Role. I have not really I know I like a lot of those guys, but like the notion of like scaling back the production values is just like, oh, okay.
And the podcasting world has those problems as well, right? Where I want to experience the story that you're trying to tell with the game and not the meta narrative that's happening about the people doing the podcast who have to learn how to play the game in the case of Adventure Zone, or the like a little bit too much riffing that goes on when you're just not trimming the fat of the players interacting with each other. And so Dimension 20 for me is like peak form where you're getting the narrative of the game story first and the what ends up being the most unique way to entertain yourself watching something like this, which is seeing the random chance element of these people playing the game live and reacting to the roles and the moves that they're making live, telling its own kind of meta narrative about the experience of playing the game at a high level. Because for all intents and purposes, Brennan Lee Mulligan and the Intrepid Heroes are some of the best D&D players in the world.
Oh yeah.
And their editing house and their production design team are the best at realizing their playing and their campaign in a way that is easily translatable to a television show that is made for mass market consumption. Because even though we do spend a lot of time in Dimension 20, just seeing all these people interact both in character and out of character, the level of detail that goes into things like the miniatures and the map visualizations and the character art of this show really brings it over the line for me in terms of a fully realized project and narrative on all sides of all these different kind of modes of art working together that the anthology format allows it to have, where knowing that we're only going to have so many episodes allows the team to focus on making a finite number of things as best as they can be, and setting up narrative arcs for Brennan as the DM, setting up narrative arcs that more or less have to be resolved by the end. Because even though there is another season that returns to the Unsleeping City, most of what you're going to see here is a story that has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Open and shut.
That despite this show being like 30 or so odd hours long, is attempting to be concise in that,
Hmm.
yeah, draw everything to a close by the end. So you're seeing an attempt at a story fully told in a more novelistic style than
Hmm.
something like Critical Role would do, where they just kind of kept going and kept going and kept going with especially the Mighty Nine until they felt like they were just really getting tired of these characters and needing to work to an end. Where this, they really, I don't know, a big appeal for me with Dimension 20 is the idea that Brennan can take these little one sentence ideas for campaigns, and these players all bring something really unique to the table with the shared knowledge that they're going to have to end it eventually. So they need to have some kind of memorable hook that's going to let these characters really work from beginning to end. They need strong introductions with strong stepping stones that can lead to strong endings. So you have characters like Sophia Lee, who we meet her as she's recently divorced and still very washed up from that divorce. And her character arc is kind of all about how she learns to be an independent person, both from her ex and from her very controlling, like Italian American New York family.
I love Sofia Bicicleta.
I
Love
love
her.
Sofia Bicicleta. And so the concept of the Unsleeping City is that you're following six characters who are all living in New York City. That is actually a magical haven with a whole layer of magical government and citizenry lying underneath it. And so you're meeting characters that are well attuned to this unsleeping city and characters that are needing to be introduced to it, like Sophia and like Pete, or characters that don't even know that they're a part of it, like firefighter Ricky Matsui, until somebody like comes along and explains it to him. And as a person with a big love for urban fantasy, which, oh boy, this also crosses over into our Stranger Things that we're about to talk
Oh
about
yeah.
later.
Oh yeah.
This to me is peak form urban fantasy storytelling. And so I just really wanted to get into the weeds of this particular little season of television and see what you think about it and how it can compare to other peak examples of the form, like our favorite, Monster of the Week TV shows or our fantasy novels that we love so much, or even in some bright moments, the best parts of things like Stranger Things.
Mhm.
So, what did you think? Are you familiar with this format of like actual play at all? And where did Dimension 20 like situate itself for you in your relationship to that as a form of media?
Well, the only experience I really have with stuff like this is bringing it back to our favorite things of the year video is actually Smosh. They have a sort of side channel called Smosh Games, and they have a series that is not, I believe, I don't think they're doing a season three of it, at least in the near future, but they have two seasons of a show called Bored AF, which is basically their version of this. And the person who runs that is Damien, who is essentially Brennan Lee Mulligan Smosh Edition. It is who is the guy who is the best at improving on their feet, get them to be the DM. And that is one thing I want to talk about in terms of the art of being a DM, which is like one of the most difficult jobs that a storyteller or a storyteller adjacent person can have because you need to essentially know all of the rules and limitations of D&D, which I mean, I'm gonna talk about how I think this is a great way to sort of get into it without, overwhelming you with the complexities of the numbers and the rules. But there is a lot of numbers and there is a lot of rules. It is something inherent with the format. You're just gonna have to deal with it. You got to know all of that stuff. You have to be a coherent storyteller to some extent. Like you have to have a sense of dramatic flair. You got to be a little fruity with it, you know? You got to understand what makes a story work. And you have to do it, you have to think on your feet. You have to be able to guide your characters from place to place and location to location and like, notable locations that, actually have relevance within the narrative that you're telling. And I think the environment is a really good place to start with Dimension 20 because one thing that I really loved about this campaign, which for the record, I do agree with as being like, if you want a great vanilla example of what a fantastic campaign of D&D looks like, this is just a great example. And one of the reasons why it's a great example is the setting. New York City, the Big Apple, everybody's favorite. It is an environment that could be rendered very, very boringly. Like you could just, like, oh, it's the Empire State Building and
We're gonna
oh, it's
fight the Statue of Liberty.
yeah, but like this campaign does such a great job at being like a top to bottom appreciation of the city essentially. Like we're going to Grand Central Station. We're discovering the inner mechanisms of specific locations. We're going to, the library. We're talking about the MoMA. Where like you really do feel like the people who wrote this and set it up have a genuine appreciation for New York. And that actually bleeds through into the narrative in a lot of really smart ways because I think how I knew that this was going to be a very different and very good version of what this is was when the villain of this arc of the story was revealed to be real life power broker Robert Moses. Which, as somebody who is familiar with history and has read a lot about that guy, I was like, whoa, we're actually talking about like the reason that like city infrastructure in places in New England and shit are as terrible as they are because like Robert Moses is a real dude who, I mean, he is responsible for a lot of awful, shitty things that happen. Please go read about him. I mean, in many respects, he was a guy who had the power of a politician who wasn't a politician. And he is this sort of spirit who is trying to destroy and basically kind of contort the idea of the American dream. That is what the story of this is that there is a dual world in New York City. There is the normal world and then the kind of the sleeping city underneath, which is full of all of the D&D characters and such. And we see with our kind of we don't really have like a protagonist per se, but I would argue that like Pete the Plug is sort of the central character here.
Pete the Plug is
And
definitely our audience surrogate by which we learn about how this world in particular works.
Yes. And Pete is somebody who is in the normal world and at first does not know that the other world exists and is starting to see that world kind of bleed into the normal one and ultimately gets embroiled with a cast of colorful characters through a series of events that have to do with a very clever setup of this idea of Santa Con, which is this sort of collection of like, like these groups of mall Santas and stuff who are all getting together, which is secretly a thinly veiled disguise for the clones of Santa because Santa is real in this like on this sleeping city. Santa is real, but he does not go to every like house in one night. He clones himself a bunch of times, and SantaCon is the way in which he disposes of the defective clones by gathering them in one place and ultimately, again, disposing of them. And they become like zombies, and everybody needs to come together and sort of fight this and discover what the source of it is. And there's this like, Pete has this like person talking to him, and keep seeing these voices, and you're like, okay, something's clearly going on with this guy. And I want to compliment our cast because there is a huge distance between enjoying a D&D campaign because you're participating in it and enjoying a D&D game because you're watching it. And it's a lot more difficult to do the latter because you're not involved in it. You're not rolling the dice. You're not making the choices. So if you don't have a compelling cast of characters to watch or to follow or to think are interesting or just funny, then you're probably not going to have a good time. And thankfully, our assortment of characters here are played by, again, various like internet personalities, voice actors, dropout members. I was familiar with like half of the cast already because they had been on like various Smosh programs and what have you. Lee Mulligan included in that. And I love how quick on their feet everyone is. Like everyone manages to have these really sort of essential components to their characters that they never lose sight of, but they build the sort of comedy of the world into. Like Sofia Bicicletas, our sort of introduction to her is she gets in a huge bucket full of Mike's hard and she has to carry her around with her. And like silly little things like that that just endear you to these people. And, you see like, you've got Zach Oyama, who's doing Ricky Matsui, the firefighter, who is like this golden retriever himbo, who is just like, he doesn't really know what's going on. He's just kind of here to have fun and to help people. And he's
Yeah,
very
he's just
altruistic.
endlessly driven to help people with absolutely no self-interest whatsoever.
No, like his head is completely empty except for the idea of protecting people. And he is just a very like soft but very like affable and just like, oh yeah, like very, very typical archetype. And we have Sophia, who is this character who she's getting over her ex who had been stolen from her. And I remember it's like when she introduces her character, she says something like Fran Drescher, but less put together. And she's got that sort of like, that thick Italian accent. And
Yeah.
like she's very funny. And we have Lou Wilson, who is doing his character Kingston Brown, who is this older guy who is kind of safeguarding the sort of real half of the sleeping or the unsleeping city. He's kind of sort of the ambassador to the real life version of it, but is aware of the other version and is a nurse, but like helps people and is generally just like he's the guy you go to if you need help or if you need something. Like everybody knows him. He is a safeguard of his community. And you have this one of my favorite characters also by Miss Siobhan Thompson as Misty Moore, who is this like older pixie who is using glamour that she stole from the queen of the pixies to be a kind of washed up Broadway star. And like like that her character is just very funny. Like I love the sort of like highfalutin characters. Like if I was playing a member of like a D&D campaign, I would be her just because I love that sort of you're able to bounce off people very well. And the other one is Brian Murphy is Cugrash, who is a little rat. He's a little rat man. And you find out that he was a guy. He was a New York stockbroker who actually worked with Robert Moses, but was ultimately like cursed to become a rat. And he was just like a really awful person to his family. And he doesn't see them anymore. But now he's like sort of a guardian of like underground critters in the subway and
But
stuff.
yeah, he's like the sage of New York's rodents and homeless.
Yes, he's almost like a patron saint of them. And like you hear the subway workers talking about a giant rat going around and eating people. And then we have Pete the Plug by Ali Beardsley. And I love Pete. Pete is a great sort of vessel for this campaign because Pete is kind of a low level drug dealer. Pete is also kind of a himbo, sort of. Like Pete's not the smartest, not
Yeah.
the sharpest tool in the shed, so to speak, but like is sort of has had like top surgery, like that Pete, like a big component of Pete's character is that he is trans and sort of like alienated from his family. Like the first thing that happens is that uh, he
He
reconciles
goes
with
to
his
a mob
dad.
doctor to get his top surgery done, and that's how the show starts.
Yes, and the
And that's the kind of
amazing
things you
way.
can do. That's the kind of
And
things you can do when you're doing something like this. It's a little bit more off kilter, you know?
and begins by like there's a couple little fantasy things that happen, but the biggest thing that sort of hooks you is when Pete encounters Pete's dad, and Pete's dad almost dead names him, and then gets taken over by bubbles and floats away into the sky, never to be seen again, except for the end. But it was just like, I was like, oh, so it's this kind of story. Interesting. And already off the bat, just by this little cast of characters, we have kind of my favorite element of D&D because I've never actually participated in a full-blown game of D&D. But you know what I have done? Make a lot of D&D character sheets. I had lots of friends who were into TTRPGs and stuff, and they had all of this. Like, I had a friend whose dad was a really big, sort of like actual 80s Dungeons and Dragons, experienced it during the Satanic Panic kind of guy, and he had all this old stuff. And I would make copies of those D&D sheets to like make characters I would write about. And I feel like that's not a unique story to me. I feel like I've heard a ton of people like because the bar for entry with D&D is kind of so high because you need a dungeon master, you need people to play it with, you need a good story, you need a foundation for everything. So character sheets don't need any of those things. So you get to kind of have a little bit of the fun of the TTRPG experience, but without actually doing it because you don't have all of those things. It's like the idea of like, when Pokemon first came up and you needed a link cable to trade with friends. It's like, oh, it's neat that you can play Pokemon with your friends, but you need this thing that literally fucking nobody has, so you can't actually do the thing, but you can talk about it and have fun with it. But getting to actually see a group of talented people, and of course, Brennan Lee Mulligan, who is a phenomenal dungeon master. Oh my God, he is so funny, so quick on his feet, so good with voices, so good with sort of shifting everything and letting people know and guiding them towards where he needs to get them. Because with a dungeon master kind of has to work around the fact that your players are going to do whatever they're going to do. Like the cool thing about D&D is that you can make choices. You can go wherever you want, do whatever you want, technically speaking. But to be a dungeon master, you kind of have to mold everything around the idea of the story. So I think like how they go about writing this is they essentially structure everything around really specific set pieces. And then when they execute said set pieces, they have kind of a big combat scenario, and they'll have all the things on the board. They'll have everything measured. Like one of the things I found most impressive about it is there's a fight scene that happens after our characters all come together and they're in the sewer. And there is a rising water level within the sewer that inhibits your movement and makes it more difficult so that you have to rely more on your acrobatic stats than like your base movement stats. And it makes everybody have to play the game very differently, and it ends up creating interesting opportunities for characters like Pete, who like jump across places and have to like hang on to ledges and stuff. It's really interesting. But like the way they show the rising water level is they have the built scenario sort of tabletop thing, and then they'll have a little thing that like a piece of plastic that like conforms to all of the divots that they put up there, and then it corresponds to the rising water level. And that's the thing I find like the most impressive about Dimension 20 is just like the production value. Like the editing, the various camera angles, the like there is no real like wasted moment. Everything is always moving, everyone is always talking about something. Again, there's no dead air. It's the idea of like live streaming something like this sounds like it would be a fucking disaster, but that's for people who, do that kind of stuff. Like there is so much time, energy, and effort filmed, or there's time, effort, and energy put into filming every sort of angle from which this takes place at. And just, lots of little tiny stuff that, as somebody who's familiar with like editing and post-production stuff, that stuff's not easy. Like this is a television show in so many more ways than one. And in fact, I would say it's arguably like better than a lot of modern TV because it manages to consistently be compelling and not ever like let down its storytelling or anything, but it manages to have a forward thrust and actually be impressively made, which is not something that you can say for every long-running show. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
One thing I want to specifically focus on with regard to the Unsleeping City, and well, a lot of Dimension 20 takes on this format, is that often you'll have one episode that is like all exposition and all character action and
Yes.
all character interaction and all dialogue that leads you into the final few minutes where they set up the big action set piece.
And then
And then the
that will
next
be the
episode,
next episode.
yeah, the next episode is just all them executing this big long combat scenario. And
Mhm.
so it's a nice kind of elliptical pace to it, where characters can have these downbeat moments to kind of go off and be by themselves. Whereas so many like bad campaigns will try to keep the party together in a
Yes.
tight pocket, rushing them from place to place that they need to go. But almost every combat interaction, a character has a moment where they realize what they're going to need to do next in the
Next.
more role play
Yes.
focused stuff that sets them off on another direction. And one of my favorite examples of this is the bodega fight. One, I
Mm.
just love, as somebody who understands the mechanics of D&D and the actual like the way you manipulate the figurines, because D&D does have more of a board game design to it than a lot of modern TTRPGs do.
Especially 5e.
Yeah, especially 5e. And the way that they render the bodega, like the way they move the miniatures around, you feel the close quarters
Yeah.
nature of the combat.
It's
Where
actually
they
claustrophobic.
yeah, they spend so much time actively talking to each other out of character, being like, oh, wait, I can't do that because there's a wall, and I can't do that because you're on the other side of this shelf, and you haven't come around the corner yet, and this other thing is over here. And like
Or
the claustrophobia of the scenario extends to the players and the way that the players talk. It's
talking
a nice
about
moment
how
where they kind of
spells can't go through walls, so you can use them without worrying about hitting your allies because there will be a shelf in the way. Like there is considerable planning around the environments and their level of interactability. It's not just an excuse for all of the guys to be in the same place. Like it really matters what these settings are and what happens in them.
And the actions have consequences, right? These setups and the way that the combat scenarios begin often have a character or two be indisposed or
Mhm.
late or in a bad position to start or be fully incapacitated at first. Like maybe my favorite full combat episode just as a whole is the one at Misty's show
Yes,
where
that's
she's
my
on
favorite too. I
stage.
fucking loved that one. The
Okay.
one where a combat scenario where a real actual very important element of it is trying to rally the ghost of Stephen Sondheim to help you fight mobsters. That's amazing.
And Brennan, homebrews a lot of fun elements that add to the D&D stuff, but also make things more mechanically interesting. Like Pete, the specific kind of sorcerer that he's playing, has a thing that's called a wild magic surge. Or basically, anytime you cast a spell, you roll a d20, and if you roll a 1, you roll on this weird percentile table, and some kind of side effect will
Yeah.
occur. But Brennan uses that to represent the kind of instability of Pete's newfound powers by having the wild magic surge become incrementally more likely, which
Yeah.
leads to more magic surges happening. But he also rewrites the potential magic surge outcomes,
Yes.
or possibly is just even improvising them on the fly when they happen.
Who
Who
knows?
knows? But that's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's another element of the like, this is not a live recording happening where Brandon
Mhm.
can kind of mess around with some of the mechanics. And they do that as well with that Broadway fight where the characters keep having to make performance checks to make sure that Misty's performance goes over well and that they don't cause her kind of spell that she's doing with the whole play that she's been putting on for the whole season to go awry, which will lead to her just dying.
There's I just figured out what it reminded me of and I couldn't place it. There's like a level in a Paper Mario game where you essentially have to appease the audience watching you as much as you have to fight your opponent. And I love that idea of kind of splitting the dichotomy of just being like a combat scenario never just feels like only a combat scenario. There's always an aspect of it that feels like you can creatively work around something that adds in a kind of unexpected X factor. And with characters who have like increasingly, like it really does feel like everybody got to use the breadth of their abilities as like, constantly like Pete in particular. I love how Mulligan describes some of Pete's abilities, like the flesh on his arm, like becomes this like weird helix that like melts down and then like energy like comes from like his descriptions are consistently so like fine-tuned and so visual that you know exactly what he means and what he's talking about. And again, that's a hard art to master. Like you can be a good writer and still be a shit DM. Like I would probably be a terrible one. And I fucking write all the time. But that's the thing is that it's a combination of various elements. And I love what you pointed out in terms of like the way that the party keeps splitting up because it really takes advantage of getting to see these people, without the context of the group, because like we do have a lot of moments of them sort of like bonding, hanging out, and just sort of talking about stuff. But it is balanced by giving them specific character moments and character beats that you could really only get in isolation or just sort of referring back to their past or their home or their environment or something. And D&D campaigns can get a little samey if everybody is all together and you're kind of, relying on the well-worn tropes and doing the back and forth and like, it's
Found
basically all
family.
yeah, it's like it's all
Uh,
gonna default to being Guardians of the Galaxy eventually. So like when we get moments of Kingston has to go back to work and do his job and then goes home and we see a little bit of a sort of flash into his past where he has this relationship with this woman who is like he's gonna marry and like does marry this person, but ultimately their relationship dissolves because he can't really find space for this person and also be the guardian of this city and ultimately has to choose being the guardian just because it's such an important duty to fulfill. And like that moment is actually like, there are several moments in this campaign where I did get a little bit choked up because Mulligan is able to describe them in ways that feel very emotionally potent. And, we've got the sort of like Sophia discovering that her husband is it didn't really leave her for someone else, but that someone else wanted to, like, that was the person. Wait, was that the person they fought in the Broadway fight? Was that
No,
one
no,
of
no,
the
no.
people?
So what happened with Sophia's husband was that the rest of Sophia's family was also involved with the like
The
pixie
mafia.
mob family, the Confettis.
Yes.
Um,
The
and
confettis. I love that.
darn confetti.
And
Um,
basically, like the succubus, or the woman who stole him ends up being a succubus.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. But she didn't really steal him. She just wanted to kill him.
Right.
And that was just the cover story that the family told Sophia because they didn't like him all that much to begin with.
Yeah.
And so she ends up having this revenge quest on basically everybody that she's ever known and also everybody she's about to meet over
Yeah.
what they did to her husband.
Which is not at all the direction you see that character going in, because when she's introduced and you think about her character from a writing standpoint, it's like, oh, it's going to be a story about her learning to move on from her relationship and be independent. And that is true. But the mechanisms by which this is accomplished are so much more complicated. And like discovering that he was involved in this thing called the
The Order
something
of the
about
Concrete
concrete
Fist.
fists, and how they were like these guardians essentially of the city, and how she got like kind of wants to carry forward the sort of like kind of feels the expectations of the Brotherhood of the Concrete Fists, and like wants to essentially do what they did, and becomes like this really shining beacon of confidence that ends up being like spearheading them in like the final battle. Is like this really great moment for her as just being this sort of like a character having a journey in an arc in a story like this is something that is very difficult to accomplish kind of organically with all of this emergent storytelling without being like hackneyed about it. But they do such an excellent job of doing this for everyone. Like, there's also the element of Kingston not really trusting Pete, and even having the like conversation with the others of just being like, look, my duty as a guardian of this city is my duty, and if it comes between trying to save everyone and saving Pete, I'm going to save everyone. And not only does that alienate Pete a little bit, but it's like Kingston has to ultimately overcome this and just sort of learn to trust somebody who, Pete is very likable.
Pete is a screwball. Like
Like
he
Pete's
is
a
a fuck up.
deadbeat. Like Pete does kind of suck a little bit. Like literally they keep joking about the fact that Pete sells drugs to high schoolers. But at the same time, there like Pete is always someone who is painted as like not completely far gone in terms of how wayward they are, as somebody who just needs a bit of a lighthouse to be steered towards. And that's sort of what the group ends up being, is sort of a beacon of altruism that Pete will ultimately pick up on and try to strive towards, especially when you have somebody like the villain Robert Moses, who is basically trying to, like for a little while serves as the kind of devil on Pete's shoulder a little
Mhm.
bit, just being like, I love the way that they explain the actual mechanics of what's going on, because it's like the there's like this other dimension that essentially is this sort
There's a
of,
dream world where
yeah,
things don't necessarily have a fixed meaning.
it's the warp from Warhammer. It's like everything is emotions, everything is magic, and everything doesn't necessarily adhere to logic and rules and all of that stuff. It just kind of
But
exists in an ephemeral way.
what Robert Moses, and this is just a great extended metaphor, but what Robert Moses wants to do is summon the American dream, an actual being, into the material plane. When he does that, the American dream can no longer be this kind of
Nebulous.
malleable, yeah, shifting, nebulous thing. It has to find a form to take on. It has to become material. So
Mhm.
there has to be some kind of singular definition of the American dream, which obviously Robert intends to use for his own ends. But ultimately, a big lesson of the show is that you can't always brute force logic your way through all this magic stuff, and that
Hmm.
some things are just going to be impermeable and malleable, and they're going to mean different things to different people, and people find different ways to cope with that. I mean, like the Order of the Concrete Fist basically exists to be a paragon of pragmatism in the face of that, right?
Yep.
Where their whole thing is that, yeah, the dream world can do whatever it wants to do, but we're going to hone our powers to become the most ideal, realistic, and again, pragmatic version of ourselves. And that's where, like, to talk in D&D terms, it's where like the monks and the fighters hang out.
Yeah.
Is that they're the people who know how best to channel their powers into an extension of themselves. Whereas like Pete, who is a sorcerer, is always going to kind of be existing in flux.
Hmm.
And I just love this is my favorite thing about this as an example of urban fantasy, which is that not everything can be held and explained by the characters that are in it. Not
Hmm.
everything can be fully contextualized. With the magic of the Unsleeping City, everybody who has a semblance of an understanding of it knows that that's all that they have.
Yep.
No one person is able to fully capture the magic because that's not what magic is for,
Mm-mm.
right? Magic ultimately ends up becoming just an extension by which you can understand the world, act upon it, and fulfill your sense of self. Those are what all these characters ultimately figure out ways to do, is that you've got, how Ricky just kind of consistently stays as this paragon of goodwill and action the whole way through. Like his character is just kind of never challenged at all, which I think is interesting. I mean, Ricky's ultimate challenge is that he ends up falling in love with somebody, and
Yep.
he ends up experiencing like what being selfish is for the first
Hmm.
time in his life, and has a crisis of faith with that of like, how can I be expected to want something for myself when I've given up so much to service? And Kingston has that element to him as well, which I think is really great. But then you have characters like Kugrash, who, despite having risen to such high stations in like the magical world, just feel like complete rock bottom the whole time and
Oh yeah.
have to find ways to accept who they are and what they've become by attempting to reconcile their relationships with their families, but also ultimately having to figure out what it means for Kugrash to be Kugrash, because you can never go back to what you once were.
When ultimately Kagurash comes to confront the children that he abandoned at a couple of points throughout the story, and like they don't reconcile. Like they're just like, yeah, I mean, you left us and like you were shitty. I'm really glad that you've moved on to like be a better person and help people and like, actually stand up for those who need your help. But this bridge between us has long since been destroyed, and there's nothing we can do. Like, there's no sort of forced emotional kind of like, reconciliation or anything. It's like these people do have to legitimately deal with tangible consequences to their actions, which is what makes a story like this interesting in the first place. Because if everybody gets a happy ending and everything is uncomplicated, the journey always means less. That's just true for storytelling in general. And it's why, like, thematically, this manages to come together so well because the whole, like, Moses wanting to will the American dream into the real world and thus destroying its nebulous meaning and basically concentrating the American dream into just meaning capital gain, just power. That's all he wants it to be. And you have this cast of characters who all embody why the American dream should be preserved, which is, the idea of immigrants coming to America and being able to find, stability and make it in their own way in the world. Like, there are various different perspectives from all of the cast members that reinforce why that shouldn't be, why he shouldn't succeed beyond the fact that he's just evil. Like they all have a stated reason that sort of proves why they should be doing what they're doing without making it like some chosen one horse shit. Like that is such an easy trope to rely on that makes everything a little simpler and that I understand in the context of D&D because you have to be goal oriented when it comes to these things. which is why Dimension 20 accomplishing it is such a feat because again, it's just not something that you're able to do.
You see characters engaging in discourse frequently
Yeah,
about the nature of magic and the role that it plays in their lives in a way that isn't just like, this is how we
mechanical.
stop the bad guy and this is how the magic works. It's like, no, it can be this and that challenges me, or it can be this and this is how I understand how I live my life, or this is just the way that it's always been for me, but it's working. Like that's what Misty is all about, is that she's kind of like the Doctor, where she
Mhm.
reincarnates into these different forms, and but because she's a bard, she's able to just like sustain her life force by consistently just becoming famous in a different way.
I love that idea of like that specific her being a bard in the way that she's a bard is such a unique take on that kind of character archetype that I've never really seen before. And I mean, it leads to a lot of kind of ways you can uniquely utilize basically using a dexterity check or using a specific check of any kind of any of these characters. It feels like the cast members always go out of their way to sort of not own to sort of use their characters to mechanically justify whatever it is that they're doing. And it just makes the storytelling more coherent. It just makes everything feel like it makes more sense. And kind of stitched along the progression of this, we also do have everybody doing their best to just kind of do little nice improv comedy bits that I mean, honestly, I thought that this shit was a riot. The fucking part where they're in like a restaurant and Sophia is doing Kagash's hair, and then the waiter has to come up to them and it's just like, everybody is really weirded out by your baby with really long hair. You need to leave. Like that fucking bit absolutely demolished me. And there's so many good little bits like that. Like the pixie wedding is great. There's lots of good, the Godfather bits are very good. I'm a very big Brennan Lee Mulligan voice enjoyer. His many accents are very, very good, very, very pro silly voice guys. Like
Yeah.
everybody kind of has one of those, but like Brennan's very malleable. Like I never like there's sometimes you can try a little bit too hard or you can kind of go outside of your reach and then it just ends up breaking the immersion, but like no, it never really happened. Like he is very good at just suiting whatever current need needs to be suited. And that is, you gotta wear a lot of fucking hats to do any of this, really. Which is again, it is why it is so impressive and why like each episode of this feels like such a complete episode. Like if you watch this nightly with somebody, it really does kind of feel like you'll have a really satisfying, just sort of like A, B, C journey. And yeah, I mean, like it's really, really compelling. Honestly, like I only have one real complaint with Dimension 20, and it's not like it, I will freely admit this is like a 50% Jake thing in that golly, I love improv. I love stories and I love the banter between everyone so much. And they do such a great job of capitalizing on it that there are some times where the combat scenarios just can't help but pale in comparison and they last a very long time. Like, I won't lie, through the combat episodes, I turned the playback speed up to times two, like I do with any good audiobook, because that's just how my brain processes information, and I've got to have, it's just fucking. I've probably got some undiagnosed bullshit that makes me have to process information quickly. But I was just like, with the first couple of scenarios, I was like, this is feeling like it drags a bit more than the story sections, but it's not that much. And it's also just like when you're watching other people play a game and they're doing the playing the game part, yeah, it's less compelling than if you were actually sitting there doing it with them. That's just kind
Yeah.
of natural.
Well, there's a different layer of the emergent storytelling that comes with the actual play, which is getting to see the player hit the nat 20, right?
Oh yeah.
That's a completely different like factor that goes into
Hmm.
watching something like this. And so even if I mean, obviously the combat scenarios are probably mostly planned ahead so that they have time for the artists and the like prop
Yeah.
people to build everything they need to build and get all that stuff together, which is fine. You can
Yeah.
absolutely do that. But some of these other actual play shows go way too hard on trying to satisfy the fans to the point where they just straight up start scripting shit to
So,
happen. And
hey,
I can tell that's
ugh.
not happening here, but this particular one has a wow factor unlike any of the other seasons of Dimension 20 that I've watched, where there are just so many moments that, like, wow, I can't believe that person hit that roll or thought of that move at that time. And in probably every other combat episode, and even in a few of the role play episodes,
Yeah.
there's a moment where somebody realizes, oh, there's a mechanic that would work really well here, and Brennan's jaw just drops.
Yeah, like I remember in one of the final episodes, somebody gets a nat 20 on like a perception check, and it essentially drives the entire rest of the episode
Yeah,
because he was just like,
Allie
"Did you
gets a
actually
nat
hit
20.
that?"
Allie gets a nat 20 so that Pete can understand the American dream. And
That's so sick. Yeah, 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 yeah,
that
yeah.
drives this whole monologue forward in a way where I have to stop and ask myself, like, what were you gonna do
Yeah.
if they rolled anything else? Like, but that's the thing. And I've had this experience as well. Shout out to my players. I've had this experience as well with my Monster of the Week campaign where I'm running of just like, oh, now that this person has said that this is what should happen in the story, I have no idea what I was thinking with what I had planned before. Or like now that this person has hit this role, the direction of my story is about to completely change, but in a way that's interesting and in a way that does what no other like form of play does, which is that it gets people around you invested in collaboratively making a narrative experience happen that's going to create this kind of psychological experience for everybody of like it's like hitting a good three-pointer almost where like
Mhm.
that changes the feel of the room but it keeps the game moving as well, right?
Yeah.
It's a weird moment of spontaneity that drives narrative forward that you're only going to be able to see in narrative in actual play shows like this, but there's always just a little bit of alchemy to it that's
Yes.
unpredictable. And this show has the most moments where I feel like the spontaneous, random moments drive the narrative forward the best and the
Yeah.
smoothest. And so it just has a little bit of wow factor to it, and that's why this is the particular one that I chose.
The spontaneity is important because I feel like why people value that, especially why people like us value it, who, take such active participation in storytelling and are interested in multiple kinds of it, are that if you took this exact campaign, like you kept all of the set pieces and the overall story and vibe the same, and then you got a completely different cast of characters. You got a bunch of different people who were also like on Dropout or something, and they got to do their characters, but you set them within this framework. You would have two like completely different things that just so happen to have a couple of things in common. And that's awesome. Like it embodies the destination is doesn't matter, it's the journey that matters, which is what D&D is fucking for. Like at the end of the day, it's awesome that all of these narrative threads coalesce together, but like the reason I think that these things are interesting are because I want to see what happens when a bunch of different people get together and there's just the possibility that they could do or want or say anything at any given moment, and it arises like, things that you don't particularly think of or things that you wouldn't expect will happen, and it surprises you in ways that scripted storytelling simply can't accomplish. It's why in hindsight it's so clear to me why Baldur's Gate 3 was such a successful game, because this whole scene picked up so much steam during the pandemic. Like this, like both things like Critical Role Dimension 20 and just TTRPG in general alongside things like Warhammer became like way bigger in this decade because of COVID. And because of that, People want a vehicle to be able to experience this kind of thing, and Baldur's Gate 3 lets you do that without having to read all of the rules of D&D 5e. It just has it built into an engine you can participate in, which is cool. Like it people want this. People find it interesting. People want to be able to be involved but also witness something unique and interesting. And I think that's awesome. I think that that bleeding into the wider world of media and storytelling is like healthy because it embraces just a completely new world of possibilities for what we even think of as storytelling. Because like think about the idea of D&D being storytelling. That doesn't sound right in your head, but then you actually do it and see it happen and you're like, "Oh no, like this is a medium. This is its own medium that has its own rules and its own things to it that it's just not like, you can't classify it or confine it to its own thing. Like it is its own artistic medium now. And that rules."
Yeah, and there's different ways to express it and adapt it and experience it. And Dimension 20 is just one of the many great ways to experience it. And the Unsleeping City is, I think, one of their best forays into this attempt to make D&D entertaining by relying on the skills of very talented performers and very talented artists to make a television show basically about watching the best D&D players play D&D for a really long time.
Precisely. Like I would really recommend anybody on the fence who wants to experience something like this is such a great starting point to just pique your interest. And hey, if you want something shorter, I now have an even deeper appreciation for the 2 seasons of the Smosh Show that did this, which are really, really short and compact episodes, and that I think have a lot of the same strengths. But Dimension 20 here, like, I don't think you're gonna likely to get a better DM than Mulligan. Like, I really, really don't. It's why they have him on their board game channel so often to do emergent storytelling tabletop RPGs because he is simply very good at it. They have an episode where he basically shows up for them to play basically a D&D campaign that is simplified to every kind of check is sort of simplified to you pulling out a Jenga block and whether or not you're successful at it. And like, go watch that hour-long episode. And if just that little idea of people participating in this to do this, if this sounds interesting to you, take the plunge and watch Dimension 20 because I really think that there's something truly special within all of this.
There's also, and I'm not talking about Dimension 20 as a whole, so don't score it this way, but
Mm,
Mulligan, Dimension 20 has gotten a lot of great genre hopping qualities to it.
mm.
So if you're just looking for something that piques any kind of genre curiosity that you have, there's Fantasy High, which is like Brennan's more straightforward take on like fantasy storytelling, Magic Academy stuff. But then there's also Escape from the Bloodkeep, which is like, what if we did a villain quest? And there's all kinds of different tributes to different things. There's like a dark fairy tale themed horror season, or there's a season that uses a not D&D system where characters get sucked into an action movie from the 80s. And so there's a bunch of different genres that Dimension 20 plays with. And so if the urban fantasy stuff isn't your bag, but you still want to look at a D&D story or like a TTRPG story, Dimension 20's got variety for you to look through.
I'm literally like on my phone saving some of these playlists to my YouTube right now because that kind of sounds awesome. Like I very, very much enjoyed this in probably a little bit more than I expected to, even just because I mean the presentation of all of it is unrivaled. And I feel like it's impossible to watch any large amount of these and not really want to do it yourself a little bit. Just a little bit, and that's cool. Do things with your friends and have fun. Yeah, this gets a hearty 4 out of 5 from me. This was really awesome.
All right. Very happy with that.
Okay.
So let's imagine
So
that this Waddle Dee is me committing to rewatching all of Stranger Things in time for this video. A show most of which I have not seen since it aired for the first time. And now imagine that this swollen, tersed Kirby is me now after having watched all of Stranger Things front to back. Miserable, overstuffed, crooked, a little bit blurry,
A little pink.
a little pink.
So, some backstory here. In 2016, I graduated high school. And during that year, because of a random bus ride on a random day, met my friend Morgan. And we talked about movies a lot. I think we talked about our favorite movies of the previous year, and we both bonded over how much we liked Sicario at the time. And fast forward to that summer, and I'm thumbing through Netflix at the time because I believe a season of Daredevil had dropped. And I saw this preview for this thing called Stranger Things. This really mysterious trailer that didn't really say a whole lot. It was very vibes based, and I was like, you know what, this looks like it'll be my kind of thing. And that summer, I was like, yo, Morgan, you want to come over and watch this? And he did. And we watched the entire season that day. And it was kind of a foundational aspect of our friendship. And then we continued to do that for the next two seasons. And our thoughts developed over that course of time. But there was a period after watching that first season where I was a huge, genuine fan of this show. My mom bought this for me for a reason that Christmas. Even though I'm fairly certain this is not official merch. I'm pretty sure this is just a thing on Amazon that printed it onto a random hoodie that's not very good quality. But regardless, Stranger Things in 2016 and then the kind of following year being host to It Chapter 1, there was a kind of 80s revival in the air in the late 2010s that was big, strong, and burned out spectacularly by the end of the last year. But while it was happening, I was going to college and I decided to write my book series, primarily because a lot of these stories were on my mind. And so I have a fondness for Stranger Things in that respect because, in a lot of ways, it did inspire me to do one of the biggest undertakings of my life. So I want people to remember that when I endlessly bitch about the five seasons of this show now that we have it in the rear view. And the reason I wanted to recommend it to Jen was really just because A, I had heard so much talk about season five that I was just like, I had no interest in watching this season until everyone started complaining. And I was just like, what is the big hubbub about exactly? Because when I think about disappointing endings, the notion of a disappointing ending, I feel like has evolved considerably since two kind of ultimate nexus points for popular fiction. And the 2 points are Game of Thrones season 8 and The Rise of Skywalker. And they are two quintessential examples of why you should not rush your ending. Because everybody was real pissed about these endings for a multitude of reasons. There were so many expectations on The Rise of Skywalker. It was coming off of a controversial last entry, and you had Abrams coming back and trying to placate all parties involved, and just ended up satisfying nobody. And with Game of Thrones, it was that they ran out of material to adapt, so they had to rely on their own instincts rather than George R. R. Martin's, which are considerably less good. And
It's also become
while
much more clear now that those guys wanted to jump ship whether the show was ready to be over or not so that they could go make their Star Wars movie, which look how that turned out.
and in both instances, I think both of those things I just talked about sucked, but I don't really envy the people who had to make them. I mean, I kind of have a little bit more sympathy for D&D than I do JJ Abrams because with JJ Abrams at the end of the day, it is like this is the hole that you dug for yourself. But with D&D, it's kind of like you have such a tight grasp on adaptation that just gets looser and looser with every season. And of course, you're not going to execute the ending as well as the guy who wrote the original story. Like that, like naturally. Like who, there are plenty of people in Hollywood in suits who, if they were in charge of Game of Thrones, would have done exactly the same thing. Like, I do not think that that failure was unique to them. But you know what failure is unique? Stranger Things, because this isn't based on anything. This doesn't have expectations to contend with beyond the ones that the Duffer Brothers set for themselves, which is kind of why I found it peculiar when Stranger Things season 4 was announced at all, because man, when I go back and watch that show, and you sit down for the season 3 ending, it's like, damn, what a nice 3 season show that should not continue because nothing needs to be. And then every episode was so long.
Every episode of season 4 is feature length. I just want, for people that don't know that,
That's that. And before, the longest episode of the show was an hour long. Like that was it. It was 40 minutes to an hour, normal structured television. So basically, how I think we should talk about this is just kind of season by season abridged to get to the main event here, which is season 5. Season 1 of Stranger Things is good. I like season
good.
1 of Stranger Things. In fact, I'm going to say something bold. I only think Stranger Things has one bad season of television. I think that for the many faults of this show and the many, many missteps that are even in seasons that I like, I would not call any of the first 4 seasons of this show wholly bad. In fact, I think that seasons 1 and 3 are rather good seasons of television. But the thing about season 1 that I like is that it is small. It is very good at painting a portrait of a tiny little town in Hawkins, and you get to know this cast of characters. It's very Stephen King, it's very Salem's Lot. There's a central mystery, there's some Steven Spielberg, government ET, it's kind of stuff happen, like
I would
lots of
say
different
Steven
things going on.
Spielberg and Stephen King are the two main
Oh
strands of
yeah.
DNA by which this show is formed.
And that certainly can be attributed to the success. I also think the important thing to Stranger Things' success is the cast, which is kind of mind-blowing when you think about it, because, I mean, the person who was most famous before this was Winona Ryder, who notably was blacklisted from Hollywood for like a decade because she shoplifted, which still to this day remains bullshit. But when she
Insane.
was the person who was like the reason people were tuning in, it's like nobody knew who David Harbour was. All of these kids were completely unknown. And so it had a kind of allure to it because, well, season 1 of Stranger Things is incredibly well acted. There's a lot of really potent drama in it and a lot of really great opportunities for the cast of kids to be able to be good actors. And it does a good job of introducing you to an environment, and it does a lot of simple things very, very well.
Right. Stranger Things is the epitome of balling on a budget for a
Hmm.
sci-fi television show of its scale. Like going back and revisiting that first season, I really was not prepared for how like cheap and compromised a lot of the visuals are
And
in a
I
way that
I
honestly
like
gives
that it
it
looks like
charm.
that, by the way.
Yeah, it gives it charm. Like the fact that you can't really see what's happening in that first scare in the first episode.
Hmm.
I kind of dig it. It's got a Goosebumps level charm to it that I
The
miss
the
from
flashy lights
genuine
that have to
television.
coat the CG of the Demogorgon in basically every single scene it's in. There has to be a flashing light. It's there is something to it that does like eventually you get the like, oh, it's scary now. Like there is something about working around that limitation that works, and I think that that's broadly true about the whole season.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing that the Duffer Brothers did that was so intelligent was that they were making a tribute to Spielberg, to Stephen King, but especially Steven Spielberg, that focused on the Spielberg mom, but
Hmm.
having that character be a completely opposite representative of that archetype,
Hmm.
where from the minute we meet Joyce, an erratic and abrasive person, but
Hmm.
one who is also like fiercely committed to the mission, which is just
Hmm.
like one protecting her kids in a normal way. But once this like paranormal shenanigan starts happening, she wastes no time in like trying to use all the resources available to her to figure out what's going on, even when it seems like she's losing her mind. That's the thing about, the Spielberg stories of wonder and joie de vivre and whatever, is that you get by with the fact that it is like a children's fantasy adventure, but it being so focused on Joyce's experiences of the supernatural leans it much more firmly in a strictly horror-centric direction, which Stranger Things also became known for. And
Hmm.
frankly, just that the fact that the biggest show on television for the entire one of the biggest shows on television for the entire late 2010s was like a weird sci-fi horror show, that's honestly a really big novelty to me. And it
It's gosh, since maybe Lost, a show like that hasn't been that big.
Yeah, I mean, the bridge from Lost to Game of Thrones to Stranger Things, like Lost is where TV culture first interacted with nerd culture, but
Hmm.
Stranger Things is when the nerd culture that came to dominate the film world of the 2010s began to bleed into television. And the Duffers, I have so much less respect for them doing research for this episode, man, because the way that they've spent the whole last 10 years talking about how they basically failed up by flying by the seat of their pants and getting lucky off that Netflix money, mm, I have more to say when we get later, but the
Yeah.
thing that I admired them for in the beginning was seeming to commit to pitching this as an anthology show. They pitched this as a American Horror Story style. I don't that they didn't name drop that in the pitch, at least that's not from what I've read.
No, but
But
you're right.
the closest thing that Stranger Things could have been is like American Horror Story, where they would have gotten like a couple big names to do some kind of tribute to some old 80s movie, but do it as like an 8 episode miniseries
It would
instead
be
of a
so
movie.
nice to have a horror anthology not made by Ryan Murphy. It would be so nice, man. And hey, there are shows like, oh, there was a show that came around at like
Channel Zero
Channel
is
Zero.
actually
Thank
a
you.
good version of this, especially the season with Barbara Crampton,
Shit,
which
I
I
haven't seen that.
yeah, it's one of the later ones that she's the lead in. It's really good. But it's the
Okay,
only
well
one
then
that I've
I'll.
seen. I need to watch more Channel Zero. But yeah, if you're actually looking for an example of what Stranger Things could have been, go check out Channel Zero on Shudder. But anyway, what Stranger Things ultimately becomes is a product that cripples under the weight of rising expectations and diminishing returns. Because of the production cycle of television, look, there's no nice way to say it. They did not know how to run this show and
No.
run this production in a way to make the story satisfying. When you get to a point where the last season of this show was 4 years ago, something is wrong. Something is
It,
disastrously wrong. You were not listening to what your audience wants. And this is the thing, we talk about this all the time. Like TV became movies and movies became TV with the rise of Stranger Things and with the rise of the MCU and
yep.
Game of
Yep.
Thrones, right? Where the appeal of TV for some reason got transplanted into what's going on in the movie theaters. And
Hmm.
the appeal of movie theaters, or not even the appeal of movie theaters, but like the limitations of big big blockbuster franchise filmmaking got grafted onto Sunday night promo television, which was just a disaster for both fronts, especially in the like genre fiction worlds that we love so much and that we spend so much of our time invested in. And so what Stranger Things ultimately ended up becoming is everything it sought to destroy, right? It's a franchise that ended up going on for too long, getting way too big for its britches. And honestly, though, what's interesting about Stranger Things is that the method of storytelling that it most evokes is TTRPGs and JRPGs, where the escalation of the scope, like it really is the meme of you start out being a small town farm boy and the story ends with you killing God. But you can't do that in a television show. I mean, maybe you can. It just doesn't work here. It doesn't work for me
It,
because the thing about all the characters in season one is that they all represent these kind of subtle subversions of teen movie archetypes. The
yeah.
kids, the teens, and the adults, right? You have these kind of three groups of characters in the first two seasons of Stranger Things that all work very well and all establish these little bits of intersection and overlap, but are largely separate from one another. Where like the kids experience the plot one way, the teens experience the plot another way, the adults experience the plot in a third way. That all coalesce on a big season finale where everybody comes together to like fight the monster and save the day. And that's where it most represents the TTRPG storytelling type, which is that by the end of this, because of the way that all of these like actors and their estates have like attempted to commandeer their role in this show's production. The Duffer Brothers are basically writing a TTRPG with 11 players who are all running at odds with each other and are all vying for equal screen
And
time.
I suspect one player in particular that had a particularly large sway over how this game went, but we'll get to that when we address that. But you're completely right, and I feel like that gets to the heart of a foundational problem with season 1 of Stranger Things in that this is gonna sound weird. I don't think the characters in Stranger Things season 1 are particularly important, and I also don't think that that's actually a problem. Because, like you said, these characters represent subversions of specific archetypes, and they overall, they don't really serve to have like journeys as characters. They serve to be an environment. They serve to be cogs in a machine, and the machine is Hawkins. You are getting a sort of bird's eye view of a location and all of the components within it. And it is about trying to craft memorable images despite having those limitations. Like one iconic thing about the first season of Stranger Things is the Christmas lights. That's such a great idea. The Christmas lights and the setup of how she communicates with Will. Like, that's a really smart setup of how a character is displaying their ingenuity and motivation. And also, just it's a visual idea that you remember. And you're like, oh, yeah, I remember when they did that. It's something that, like, that would be the cover of the book of Stranger Things if it was a Stephen King novel.
Yeah, it was all those
And
letters painted on the wall with the Christmas lights drawn over them. It's such an evocative image of like, what? Why is that
And
there?
it serves as a kind of like you're kind of waiting for the moment where it's like, oh, we're gonna get a moment where we don't see Will, but we get it spelling out like help or something that's like, oh, I got shivers. Like it's able to set up these things. It's like these are things you craft when you have limitations. These are things that you do when you are working around problems and you have to solve them creatively. And, the characters in Stranger Things, I still think that they're like well performed and well written in terms of like dialogue and who they are and how they play off of each other. And it doesn't really matter that a lot of them don't really change. I mean, the only person that really has an arc in Stranger Things season 1 is Hopper. And it's really more of a just sort of he's in an unfixed state and ends it in a fixed one. And it's a little bit more simple. It's a nice little grace note that lets you have a bit of resolution. And you wonder, like, maybe the only thing about Stranger Things season one that really suggests continuing a story is just they don't really ever they just kind of bizarrely do not explain or attempt to explain why Eleven just kind of vanishes at the end of it. And it feels like everyone honed in on this one unanswered question so hard that they spent the entirety of season two being like, well, I guess we gotta try and explain it. And then they didn't. But,
Yeah, that's the
like,
thing is that rewatching season two, I'm like, oh yeah, they don't ever really explain why Elle vanishes.
it's such a profoundly bizarre thing because I need people to keep in mind when evaluating this that I don't care about answering questions. I
I don't
don't
either.
care about like the idea of like when I kept seeing things about season five is that all of these plot threads are unresolved. All these things that are brought up is like if done correctly, that can just kind of work. That is not inherently a negative. That is a neutral descriptor of something that happens. And then you watch season two, and from the very start of it, where you see a bunch of people who you've never seen before go and do, then eventually, like, you see basically an X-Men side story, and then see one of them's got one of the numbers that Eleven's got on her, and you're like, oh, okay, so there were a
Which
bunch of
that
other
I
ones.
just want to say that on the mic. That's a crazy choice.
That's a
Having the
crazy.
numbers tattooed on their arms, that's fucking crazy.
Like, the reason I said X-Men is because X-Men does this with Magneto, who was in a concentration camp.
Yeah,
That's the
they do that.
reason.
They do that literally with Magneto. They're just trying to like pay homage. Feels like the wrong way to put it, but like that's what it makes you think of, isn't it?
And I mean, yes, it is. And with season two, we begin the Stranger Things cycle where we start to see the problems that are going to start popping up. Namely, in that season two of Stranger Things is James Cameron, whiteboard, alien, write the
Dollar
S.
sign.
It's the first season, but bigger. And granted, there are things about season two that I really like. I do like the kind of flipping it on its head of basically making season two really indebted to The Exorcist instead of all of the things that it was before, because they really try to make Will's possession be a kind of focal point of this season. And partially, this is due to the fact that Noah Schnapp was being paid inordinate amounts of money for the amount of screen time that he had. Like, oh my God, have you
Are you talking about in
seen those
season one
numbers?
he was being paid a whole lot?
He was being paid way more than the other kids in season one, and that got bigger and bigger with each passing season. And I'm guessing that the dude just had a good agent or negotiator because, like, again, season one, Will is very good. He is in no way the standout of that cast at all. And it feels like in season two, they're kind of trying to rectify this by we have Will with us in the main cast now, and we don't have to spend the whole season looking for him. So instead, we're kind of doing this thing where it's like, oh, the representative of the facility is a doctor who's kind of a good guy now, or maybe he's not. And now we have Will with us, but maybe he's possessed. And, we've got Steve, who's basically done a complete moral heel turn of going from the 80s archetype jackass to actual best character in the show. Please do not hurt my son. And he had, like, the best thing about season two is Steve. Bar none, Steve and his interactions with the other kids, particularly Gate and Matarazzo, is golden. All of their comedic bits are good. They have great chemistry together. And generally, like, all of the nitty gritty problem solving that the kids have to do is very, very good. And then anytime it does anything with the greater plot at large,
Here's the thing about Stranger Things. And episode one of season two of Stranger Things is so important to understanding the problems with the show because they spend the entire episode has to be spent just establishing character dynamics,
Yep.
right? They have to completely rewrite all these characters to be in completely new positions. So you spend the whole episode just having to intake all that information and then nothing
The
happens.
whole cast of season one. Like it when you watch it, it's so it feels like a checklist. It feels like they're like, oh, we've got to go through the cast so that we can establish where they all are. And it's like, hey guys, when trying to write about a cast of characters or when you have an ensemble, you should probably tell a story if you have one to tell. Because
Yeah, and it's
like,
like compare that to how much stuff that happens in the first episode of the first season, whereas the only like plot that happens in the first episode of season two is a completely unrelated event in the cold open that will not come up again for another 6 episodes, and Will seeing a vision, and that's it.
mhm.
Like
It
the only thing you get in season two in terms of like plot that's supposed to draw you in is just a teaser for what might happen next. Otherwise, it's just meant to be like we have to catch up with where these characters are. And every season after that starts this way, where it's like
everyone.
we have some kind of big teaser image of whatever the big threat is going to be. And they're so bad about making these actually like ask questions. Like the start of Stranger Things is very good at getting you to ask questions. Compare that to the start of season three, where it's just, oh, there are Russians and
Here's
they have a machine.
everyone.
It'll say, there are the
This is
Russians and they have a machine that's boring a hole into the upside down. That does not prompt any questions. It's
no.
just going to be the only question I ask is how long are we going to have to wait to see what these Russians are going to actually do? Because after
It's
season two, I will not be tricked again into thinking that this teaser is going to ask any interesting questions about what the story could even be. Because the rest of the story is disastrously simple in terms of its genre work.
it's just kind of suffering from its own formula. And season two really kind of feels pivotal into understanding where they're going from here because anytime they deviate from that formula, they face plant so fucking hard, dude. The
The whole
most,
episode when Elle runs off to go look for Callie. I mean, people were joking about that as soon as it was out. Was it
yep.
like, oh, this was just like a backdoor pilot that
And
you did, like a bad backdoor
not
pilot.
only a backdoor pilot, but it was just like in terms of an episode of TV that is just utterly rote, predictable. Like every beat of this episode, you can call it from watching the first 3 minutes. It's like, wow, I wonder if Elle is going to join this group of misfits and then ultimately be alienated by their methods later on when she doesn't agree with them, and then go back to Hawkins so the plot can keep going again. And there's also aspects of like Sean Astin in this season was supposed to die immediately and didn't because the Duffer Brothers liked him so much, and that's real sweet. I love Sean Astin too, but we're doing this thing where we're just gonna keep repeating plot ideas over and over again with Joyce's romantic love interests and where she ends up going, i.e. Hopper. It just makes it feel like this entire fucking season is an intermediary between more important things happening. Just like,
I don't mind Bob so much in the grander scheme of things, even looking back, because there are all kinds of great one-off season characters like that in TV shows that I love. And
yes,
Bob, honestly, is a good example of that. The scene where he dies is accidentally funny because of the way that it's edited,
the
but
slow-mos. Hmm. Good job there, guys. But like,
Um, but like
there,
Bob is a great example of the kind of thing that I feel like has been missing from prestige TV, which is like the character that's only going to be here for one season, but is gonna make a big impact. Like so many characters on Smallville and Charmed and like stuff that I like
yeah,
from this kind of similar ilk do that sort of thing. And Bob is a decent example of that. And the show never really gets a character like that again. So I
nah.
ended up still having a lot of fondness for the character.
I would have been more okay with it because to me it's so like the dramatic idea with him first of all should have just probably been gotten to a little bit sooner, but it's like they kind of filter his character through Joyce in that her being with Bob kind of feels like a tacit sort of rejection of all of the things that have happened to her in a kind of like denial sort of way. And then
Yeah.
ultimately going to Hopper is like her kind of accepting what happened to her rather than trying to ignore it. But like the show doesn't really dig into that. It's way more focused on just, Joyce and Hopper being endgame. It's very like fandom oriented, and I feel like that's very abundantly true when we segue into season three, which don't get me wrong, has its fair share of problems, but like if you ask me what an ideal season of this show past season one should be, season three hits most of the sweet spots because we do have some newer characters who are coming in and contributing in decently interesting ways. We're finally getting some characters who are a little bit more oriented towards antagonists who aren't just boring scientist
CGI
supervillains
monsters
and
or boring
CGI
scientists.
monsters. And like we're getting more interesting character dynamics between people and we're getting better drama that's mined from them. I mean, like, again, the best moments of season three are just Robin and Steve talking to each other. They're just
I want to
people, and you get to see like characters like Eleven finally actually get to like live her life and be a person rather than just you're over here and you can't exist with everyone else. And it's like, oh, this character getting to come out of her shell actually feels like really narratively quite satisfying to see her like dress normally and get a friend in the form of Max and like all of this stuff. And there's way too much happening in season three, like way too much.
there's way too much plot happening in season three, but I want to focus because this is where I had the realization. This
Uh-oh.
is where it
The
occurred to me.
realization.
This is where it occurred to me. So, I mean, Stranger Things is a show that is an attempt to explore the idea of nostalgia, more or
Yes.
less. It's not explicitly about nostalgia, but experiencing Stranger Things will have you thinking about nostalgia as an idea, nostalgia
Yes.
for a very specific kind of art. The interesting thing that happened was that season two of Stranger Things is a nostalgia bait product for season one of Stranger Things. Like there's so many
And
moments
that's
in season
every
two.
season after it too.
Yeah, there's so many moments in season two where it's like, oh man, don't you remember how nice it was when this thing happened in season one?
Like, yeah, I just
To the
watched it a
point
couple hours ago.
Yeah, to the point where they start and end at the same time of year and they do the same 1 month time skip to Christmas.
Yep.
So they feel like functionally repeating the same story.
It's like
And then I have a
poetry,
quote.
Jen. It rhymes.
I have a quote from one Mr. Sean Levy with regard to season three.
Ugh.
We are not going to be caught off guard, and we don't want to be making stuff up like the day before we have to write it and make it. So we are definitely optimistic, and we have started thinking ahead. This was about season three.
What a fucking bizarre thing to say. Like, truly and honestly, and
I
here
don't
here's
envy them. Okay, so here's the thing, is that I have a soft spot for this problem with season two because of the Duffers' original plan, right?
yeah,
Obviously, they had to scrap whatever ideas they had for season
they
two
pumped the brakes
because
hard.
Netflix told them like, no, fuck you. We're keeping these kids. We're keeping this train rolling. So you got to get them
Gotta get
back,
that
and you got
merch,
to,
baby.
yeah, you got to keep the main story that you've already set up going. No anthology stuff. And so I don't like want to harp on them too hard for resting on their laurels during season two, even if I don't think it's aged particularly well in that regard. But
Mm,
season three is the moment where you prove yourself as being able to make this story one that can keep growing into the future if this is gonna be a long running thing. And season three does have some good decisions in it that get it going in the right direction, changing the season and making it a 4th of July thing,
yep.
building that mall set and getting all that incredible production
Yeah.
design in there. Like the Starcourt Mall, it's so strange. The Starcourt Mall feels like I'm watching a music video the whole time.
A little
Whereas,
bit.
like, and this is another thing about this show is that Stranger Things is nostalgic for 80s movies and 80s settings, but wasn't nostalgic for the 80s, right?
Yeah.
Because
80s aesthetics.
there's a lot of stuff in season one and two where like things are gross and houses are
Yeah.
ugly and the
Hmm.
politics of the characters are strange and like there's these wink wink nudge nudge like characters looking in the camera and genuinely saying something about communism that you can tell the
Yep.
show doesn't actually believe
Yeah.
because they're trying to make a point. But then you get to season three and it's like, oh, this is a show that is about being in love with the 80s.
A
not
time
not
where the
just
Russians were bad guys and the communists were going to take over and they were, like it's all of these very broad ideas just kind of collaging themselves together. And like the thing is that what Stranger Things does for the first four seasons very well, very consistently, is that on a moment-to-moment basis, the acting and dialogue and just like the performances in general, they do a great job at holding your attention. They do a great job at being compelling in the moment. You don't really realize many big picture problems until long after you've actually watched them. Because again, these actors are good and the moment to moment writing is good, but like structurally, it's just so lopsided and messy and strange, and you don't really know or understand why everything is so big when we know really where everything is gonna go. But I will say, I think that the final sort of the finale really of season three, I think, is like this is where this show should have ended. It's
yeah,
so
like
so
as
obvious to me that this is where it should have ended.
as aggravating as I find so many of the changes to season three's tone, especially with regard to the presence of the Russians, which is just hackneyed Red Dawn level garbage.
Yeah, it
Um,
really is.
but the
The
thing about season
fucking
three
commies.
is that it does end on a lot of really strong character beats and a lot of really
Yes.
strong resolutions for character arcs, both ones that we've seen playing out throughout seasons one through three, and with new characters like Robin and like what's her name? Lucas's little sister.
Oh,
Uh
yeah, I know who you're talking about.
yeah, Lucas's little sister, who God, I whew,
Okay, we'll put that on the back burner because I have a feeling I know where
I'm gonna
that's
save what I have
going.
to say
But
about
let
that character.
I'll just say this about season three, in that the ending to season three being like one thing I have neglected to mention thus far is the fact that I think a lot of the reason why people gave the Duffer Brothers the benefit of the doubt is that despite the fact that they are showrunners who this is their first real project, which making a 5 season long show and this being the first thing you ever do, like of course they fucked it up. What was Netflix thinking? Like think about the most famous like showrunners we have now, like Vince Gilligan. And it's like that's like the level you need to be at in order to actually be a showrunner and regularly make that your job when somebody knows these are guys who are coming in completely fresh. And I guess with season three, when everything coalesces, the kind of the buildup in scale feels novel because the filmmaking in Stranger Things, very good. The blocking in season one, excellent. That's one thing they take from Spielberg very well, is that they know how to block their fucking scenes right now. And when they kind of gradually increase in scale, when you get to Starcourt Mall and the Battle of Starcourt Mall, that bigness, it's like, oh wow, we've really come a long way. And it feels like, oh, this actually feels like a natural progression. And I'll be vulnerable here and say that I watched the first three seasons of Stranger Things with Morgan the day that they came out, and man, the season three finale, I wept. I
Oh,
I mean, I
I
like
don't blame you. Like it's an actually good
it's
episode.
the monologue at the end of it from Hopper to 11 is genuinely very, very well written and like and you read between the lines of that monologue and it's about moving on. It's about getting older and realizing that everything in your past wasn't what it was always held up to be. And it's like it feels like the writers are signaling this is over now. We're moving on. So why? Like you have this perfect moment here of again, every and there are people who have to learn difficult lessons at the end of season three. Max, Mike, these characters have to continue forward with significant losses to their lives. And that's just how it is. It's thorny, it's difficult, and you still get like, or in Eleven's case as well, you get that moment of her reading the letter, and it's just like, ugh man, I actually do feel a lot from this. And then we're continuing the story in season four, and I really think that the only reason is just because people are fandom brained and they were like, all of these things here, here, and here. What about all this, huh? And it's like, no actual person who gives a shit about this show or this storytelling or whatever actually gives a shit about any of these minute little details that season four and five are fucking obsessed with addressing. So we're just gonna do this thing where it's like now that Stranger Things is a full-blown phenomenon that is a guaranteed success, now that it is an IP, we're going to bring film level production values, and every episode's gonna be a movie, and it's gonna look like a movie. It's gonna be big, and it's gonna have really big action set pieces, and we're, and like all of this stuff, and it's like, it's
I was so deceived by how
exhausting.
good I was so deceived by how good that first episode of season four is because it's
It's very
genuinely
good.
great.
It
Like
is.
the introduction of Vecna, and they do a better job of resituating the characters in the first episode of season four, aside from the whole Hopper Russian prison plot, which is just
That
a
should have been
giant
cut.
waste of time.
All of that should have been cut. None of it should have been left in the show. All of it should go.
Yeah,
Just
yeah.
saying.
You don't need Murray around anymore. You don't need Hopper to come back, but
Yeah, I
we
don't need
gotta.
more of I don't need more of Brett Gelman shtick. Yeah, like you're an annoying Zionist. Go in the corner. I don't want to look at you anymore.
But it's another one of those things where once you like realize that the show is doing it, you're never going to be able to stop noticing it and you're never going to be able to stop being angry about it, which is
Mm-hmm.
that they refuse to get rid of any of these characters.
Oh God.
And
It's
so
so
the
obnoxious how fucking attached they are to these characters and how precious they are about
the
them.
main
Oh.
cast just keeps ballooning in size, and so they keep having to come up with things for these characters to do because everybody has to have something important to do to contribute to the story.
Jonathan and
Um,
Nancy, man, they are in this show past season one for a reason I'm sure is somewhere in the footnotes of the writing for that season, but God, they just keep dragging them back and doing a will they, won't they? And it's like, we did this already. We did this. Why are we continuing to do this? I don't care if they sleep with each other in season three, and I don't care that they don't care about each other in season four and five. Just move on.
but season four and five, it makes a lot of season four makes a lot of promises, right? The
Yeah,
Duffers were all like, we're gonna go for this big ending, and we thought this was gonna be the last season, but season five is actually gonna be the last season. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna make this 2 season long arc where we're gonna introduce
basically.
where we're going to introduce a big villain and we're going to answer all the questions about
Yep.
everything. We're going to
Yep.
answer what the Upside Down is and why Will was taken and why everything is the way that it is. And it all just becomes like Vecna. I'm just going to skip to the end here. Vecna is just Yuhabaha with all the benefits and the problems that that implies.
Oh, I
Like
see.
he is
Here's
he is a towering presence that when he is first introduced implies a change to the status quo, but then they have to keep retconning what his role in the story actually is so that he can be more menacing because he's connected to everything and it's all been Vecna this whole time. And so you're just wasting time seeing stuff recontextualized that you already had an understanding of and didn't need to have re-explained to you. So much of season 5 is looking back at the first season and figuring out how to fit Vecna into it somehow, which you do not need to do to make the story work. It doesn't make your villain more interesting that they have been the mastermind behind the story all along, especially when they haven't been, because you have to retcon it to make that make sense. It's like number one genre fiction long form what not to do in my eyes these days is retcon that one person has been behind all of the events of the show the whole time.
season 4 and 5 feel like putting 15 band-aids on a cut. There's just no practical reason that is taken to solve any of these problems. Like season 4, I'm very mixed on, but overall, I do come out being positive on it because I do think that the show is very good at harnessing really good, really effective dramatic moments in this season. And there are a lot of plot threads that are closed that are done so in a satisfactory enough manner. And not to mention, it does solve the issue of, in season 4 specifically, not season 5, important delineation I'm making here. Season 4 is like, okay, we've never really had an effective villain. We just kind of have a guy who is a monstrous presence, but we don't have like a guy. We don't have a figurehead to point to and be like,
We
he's
don't
the
have a
evil.
Thanos. That's what they
Yeah.
want. They want a
And
Thanos.
and what they do with Vecna, given the limitations at their disposal, I think they did about as good a job as I could have expected them to, because the whole thing with like going back and being more in depth about Eleven's time spent in the facility is one of the very few times we've gone back and looked to see what actually was going on, where I was like, okay, I actually am interested in this and how it plays into this character's psychology, because we've been like bizarrely kind of ignoring just how traumatic that probably was for 11 and what the implications of that even mean. So, putting this
Because we
character
don't have
there,
enough time to spend with any of these characters because we have to spend time with all of them.
but they do two good things. Is that they write an effective villain and cast Jamie Campbell Bower, a Twilight alum, who is great. Like eats his scenes whole. Like his voice is really great. You see him and you're instantly like, oh, I hate this guy. Like he's just
There's a reason
slimy
why
instantly.
there's a reason why season 4 became, in my eyes, like the most beloved since season 1.
Oh, well, it became the most beloved season is because it took a character who, like, in season 2, Max is just kind of annoying. In season 3, Max is a legitimately compelling character who ends up being one of the characters who has to lose the most. And in season 4, we're actually putting her into a spotlight, and as much as it pains me to fucking admit it, that Kate Bush scene fucking kicks. That whole sequence is a really well executed dramatic crescendo that I think is like it earned its iconic placement within the sort of realm of media that have come out recently. Like, I get why that ushered Kate Bush into the Billboard top 10. I get why that made people love characters like Max. And again, it's a very well edited, well put together scene. It looks great. There's, again, season 4 has so many great moments. We kind of get a reconciliation between I can't believe that they actually had the nerve to be like Matthew Modine is still alive, but whatever, I guess they have a good reconciliation with her and with him, and there's a lot of good drama mined. Like I think that season 4 is the biggest mixed bag, but the benefits do end up outweighing the things about it that drag it down, which aren't even bad. They're just dead weight. There's just
And
so
I think
much
I'm
of it that
just
doesn't need to be there.
and again, it's just another one, but here's the thing. It's another one of those things where once you notice it, you can't stop noticing it.
Nope.
This show does not know how to deliver exposition.
Oh my God, no.
They do not know how to get exposition delivered. And they figure out this one clever visual trick to do in the first season, which is that we have the kids who are super into D&D, like
Hmm.
extend the visual metaphors into the situation that they're in, where it's like, if we think about it this way, this might work. The
Yes.
problem is that is child logic.
Yes.
And so
And
in season two, when Brett Gelman looks me in the eyes and says, "Imagine if this vodka is the federal government." And like
that is so
does
fucking
the same like visual
funny.
shorthand, does the same visual shorthand to like deliver information to
Yeah.
both the characters and the audience. I feel like I'm being talked down to by the writers.
Oh, 1,000%. It's not only being talked down to by the writers, but also
It's
them
the
kind of
writers not
shoving the
trusting me to be able to follow any sort of visual information.
it's like not only do they not trust their audience, they're also just like they're leaning on this because they're clearly not good at it, and being didactic is how that's just all they know. They don't know of a way writing around that particular problem. And I think that one thing about season 4 that is at least quite telling about the problems that would come is just the upgrade in scale is so like this just doesn't feel like television anymore. And it's not because of the episode lengths, it's the fact that like all of the stuff with Hopper and Joyce and Russia and stuff feels like a fucking Marvel movie. And I'm just like, I
The
don't.
narrative structure is just completely busted by the time we get to season four. And
Oh God, yeah.
so many of these episodes feel like they found the transition points between one episode to the other in the edit and
Yeah.
just like had to fix whatever they had to fix. And there's one moment in season five where I can definitely tell this fucking happened, that I'm going to describe in detail. But I mean, season three has so many of these moments too, where like they
Yeah.
set up some kind of big end of episode cliffhanger, and then before the intro of the next episode even starts, they do a 5 minute scene where they just end the scene that they ended the last episode on. And so it's like, oh, you just found that in the edit and didn't have to write a new intro, right? That's
Yeah.
that's what you ended
It's
up doing. You found that in the edit, so you didn't have to write a new intro. Is it just if we cut this scene off at the pass and start the next episode in the middle of it, we'll be fine.
it's season 4 to me is an amalgamation of moments. The Duffer Brothers very clearly to me, like just as somebody who does write shit that is within this orbit, I can feel this so strongly that they didn't really maybe iron out all of the plans for the plot, but like they had the moments of, Max, being possessed by Vecna and almost dying. The setup that plays Journey separate ways when they confront the final sort of like threshold at the house with Vecna. The Master of Puppets needle drop, which against my better judgment is still really fucking cool. Sorry, I'm gonna ride for that no matter what. It's pretty awesome. But like these
I
moments
like
are
the Eddie character, and I like the show genuinely leaning into a satanic panic angle. Like that feels like an appropriate method of satire. That was a mode of
actual
improvement
80s
from season
shit.
three for me.
Yeah, actual 80s shit is here again in a way that actually feels like it plays into the setting, I guess, a little bit more. And because I mean, like with Vecna and the Satanic Panic, it's very much validation for the Satanic Panic. And that actually is a plot element. And it's like, okay, we still do have ideas here. We have these things, and it's like they just they have this list of moments, and then they were like, let's just find a way to string them all together. And that's why there's so much fat on season four's bones, is that they have great ideas and no clue how to segue between them. And boy, howdy, if that isn't a good segue into season five, which I like in broad strokes a lot of things about every season of Stranger Things. I think my least favorite season is two, just because it ends up being like we're very much on repeat, way more than any other season for me, other
Yeah.
than five, that is. And I'm like, there's still lots of things in season two that I very much enjoy. Season five of Stranger Things is for 90% of it until the finale so but fucking boring.
So the
It's
thing is,
so boring.
it makes this incontrovertible promise at the end of season four that like, oh, the Upside Down is breaking through and the final battle is on the way. And when I tell you the absolute cackle that I let out when 18 months later came on the screen, because here's the
Final
thing.
battle.
The Unsleeping City handles this very well, is that
Hmm.
at some point you have to deal with the elephant in the room when you're writing an urban fantasy story like this, which is that the speculative elements is going to crash through your cast of characters into the real world, and your story is going to have to answer some questions about what the world your story takes place in does in response to that. What does season five do? Absolutely nothing, because it
Nothing.
only focuses on the characters that already know what's going on or can immediately learn it in order for the plot to happen. And everything else is just like, ah, well, the military is quarantining the town, so we don't have to worry about anybody else, right? We don't have to worry about any other characters that we don't care about, and we can even have our characters just going to high school again, even though literally rifts from another dimension are tearing the town apart. They just kind of stop doing that for 18 months, and so they're just like
They
new
literally put a
Tremors.
band-aid on the problem. A giant metallic band-aid is put on Hawkins, and they're like,
The military just comes in to do a reconstruction project, but also quarantines the town for some reason. Well, I mean, not for some reason. Obviously, the military knows that there's a threat, but
yes.
like anybody looking at it from the outside, any character looking at it from the outside that you have any interest in, that should be the moment where that character like gets brought into the fold. But they only have one character that they want to do that with, and that's Mike and Nancy's mom.
Yeah.
And
What a weird choice too.
it's such a strange choice to make Holly such a big player in this.
I mean, like, she's an infant in season one. She's in a fucking high chair. And now it's like, well, and first of all, boy, howdy, is it apparent that she was not in that initial crop of actors, because she can't act for shit. Like,
Well,
it's
she's played by a different
bad.
actor. They hired
Oh,
somebody
it is?
else
Well,
to
then they
do
just
it.
hired someone who's bad at it then, because wow, she's really fucking bad. Like, she is flat, monotone, has none of the inflection or naturalism of the rest of the cast, and it is distracting when you are watching it.
So, okay, here you go. Each season is a loose adaptation of some movie from the 80s that you've probably seen. You've got E.T., Aliens slash The Exorcist, The Thing, plus like Red Dawn and weird Russian invasion stuff, Nightmare on Elm Street, and but that's the thing.
All of those things,
Once
and none of them?
once they run out of stuff to like build the backbone of their story off of, this whole thing begins to completely fall apart because you have all of the wrinkle in time stuff in this season is insufferable. There are three moments in this movie. In this movie, in this show, three episodes in a row where somebody goes, "Oh, this is just like that movie." Because they do that with A Wrinkle in Time. They do that with The Great Escape, and they do that. What's the other time that they do it? where somebody looks at the camera and goes, "This is just like that movie." I can't even remember what the other one is. But don't worry, they find other ways to completely steal the visual language from other movies that you like, including Alien 3 with the doggo vision. And
Oh,
but anyway. Season 5 is the final battle, and it is largely what has been promised, but because Vecna can't just be in every episode, and because Jamie Campbell Bower probably wanted time on screen without his makeup off, they have to come up with a whole new season conceit, the whole new plan for Vecna that isn't just like, I'm going to break through into the world, which was like, yeah, I thought you were going to do that. What are you doing now? Kidnapping all the children. And it's like, I'm building
so
my
we
army for when
find
I can invade the world.
so we
It's like, what
find
do you
out
mean?
we find out that all along Will has been a super important special who's going to be a vessel for Vecna for I don't fucking remember care.
Here's
But
another element where it becomes everything it sought to destroy, where we have a cold open of digitally de-aged Will Byers
ugh, it's
getting
so weird.
getting mouth
Ugh,
getting
it's
mouth fucked by Vecna. And it's like, oh, as soon as I saw that, I was like, oh, they're gonna do the thing where Vecna is Yuabaha, aren't
it's
they?
it's literally like it's mimetic how it's like a scene from season one of Stranger Things, and then the camera just like pans slightly to the left, and Vecna's like, are you fucking for real? Like, we're really doing the thing where it's like he was just off camera over there the whole time, and we keep seeing this over and over again. We also keep getting little tidbits about something in regards to Vecna's past, in regards to more of his original backstory, which is very strange to me because this was not like addressed or implied in season four. It's like an exclusively season five thing.
Well, I mean, no, season 4 does go into the like family dynamic a little bit, but it
Yeah.
doesn't ever really explain how Vecna became what he became, if I recall. It's just that the guy that they thought did it didn't, and it was actually his son, and that's the
Yes.
twist.
And I mean, like, and that's all that's like well and good and everything, but he has to for some fucking bullshit reason, he's got to use some sort of real world vessel in order to like break through and do all the bad evil shit, and that ends up being Will. And because Will now has a connection to Vecna, and because I think is it that 11 shares his blood?
Yes, because Dr. Brenner was
Yeah.
extracting
Yeah.
Henry's blood and putting it in all the test subjects. That's how everyone got their
And
powers.
we find out, we find out that Vecna is Vecna and has his abilities because as a child, he wandered into a mine shaft and found a wounded CIA agent with a briefcase that had a special rock from the upside down that he tries to kill Vecna as a child upon initially being discovered, and then it like goes inside his body and gives him superpowers. I just
Because the rock is the mind flayer. Do
now
you realize how this doesn't actually answer any of the questions of how the story of this show came to be?
it
Because
is
now my question is, how did the Mind Flayer rock get in that cave? What even is the Mind Flayer rock? Why does the Mind Flayer have a rock? Like, if you really want to be that kind of person about it, this does nothing to actually answer any of the big
if
questions
if you're a
about the show's world.
lore-brained guy, I don't like I completely understand the reaction to this because even to the people this is supposed to pander to, this is not a satisfying answer. And it's also like it's utterly dramatically incoherent because like what the fuck does any of that stupid shit even mean? You effectively just told me that that as a child, this guy went into a cave and got superpowers, and I'm like, okay, what is that supposed to inform? What is that supposed to enhance or do for any of this whatsoever? And
It's just for that one mo because they like writing big emotional monologues. It's just they had that one idea for Vecna's big villain monologue where he's like, actually, I want to work with the Mind Flayer because I'm just
and
such a bad boy.
and
Always have been, always will be.
and I am skipping over a few things that I will backtrack on here, but ultimately this pulled the exact, and I mean the exact thing I fucking hated about the ending of Naruto, where every fucking main villain in that fucking show at the 11th hour is revealed to secretly be a sympathetic character who was not in complete control of their actions, and the big bad was actually it was a complete other thing over here that's this not characterized whatever thing that was actually the source of the bad things, and that you're supposed to feel bad for the villain now. And then it does that with that villain, and then it does that with that villain, and then that villain all the way up to the final fucking boss of the Moon Princess Kaguya,
I
which
was
is
gonna say,
exactly what Vecna is.
I was
Vecna,
only thinking about the times that that happens during the actual like Great Ninja War at the end, where it only happens twice. But you're right, that also applies to like Gaara and Nagato and so many other characters in that
it's
story.
like with that it feeds into like this, there's this kind of idea in a lot of Japanese media about like, there are some stories that exist, and writ large a lot of the villains who do some crazy, awful, genocidal in some instances cases, they and people are just like really okay with it. They're very, very forgiving, and it's like, I wonder what this takes root in. And not that that is an exclusive evil to the Empire of Japan. I live in fucking America right now. That said, this is just bad fucking writing, because and I mean at the last fucking minute, what this show does is like Vecna's motivations are scrubbed from existence, and the real villain of this show is an evil cloud from hell. That's it. It just possessed this other guy who's more interesting and more threatening and actually has a character. And it's this evil unseen force. And I'm like, when has this ever been interesting? This is like literally, even Stephen King, notorious for disappointing endings, does not rely on this. At least the spider from It is malicious and evil and wants to eat children, and you're like, okay, I mean, I get that explanation. I wasn't really wondering it in the first place, so I wasn't curious, so this explanation doesn't disappoint me. Whereas
Have
here, it's
we
like,
ever stopped to think why Pennywise wants to eat children? Have we ever wondered about his inner psyche and the conflicts
this
in his mind?
that is what season 4 is, and then season 5 is like, just kidding, we're not actually going to answer that. And it's like, but you, like, I don't even care that you promised this to begin with, but you promised it and then intentionally like didn't deliver, and you completely robbed
Do you want
your
to know
only
why?
villain of all agency. And I'm like, what are you thinking, my brother in
I was gonna
Christ?
say they attempt to rob him of agency, but then of course his final note is like, actually, I don't really mind that I got possessed by an evil space alien.
Which
Never did. But
which
anyway,
is just
the
bad
the
writing.
funny
It's just like whatever then. I don't even like, why does
why are we
anybody
even
care
here?
about this?
Why are we even
Why?
here? The funny thing that they did was that they did that prequel play that they did that's
Oh,
actually about Henry as a child in the
is
1950s.
that what it's about?
That's what it's about. It's a prequel that's about Henry's childhood and that Henry went to high school with like Hopper and Joyce. So you get to see them again and da 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 da. And it ends on this
Oh,
big reveal that
when it cuts
it
back
doesn't
to
even really
the
reveal anything. It's just like, oh yeah, Vecna's evil and he killed his parents. Things
there's
we already knew.
there are points where the show will cut back periodically to like the 60s when the parents were in high school, and I turned to Rhiannon and I was just like, this feels like Riverdale because they do that. They do that thing where the cast members all play their parents' version in like the 60s and the lighting's all like bloomy and sepia toned and you're just kind of like, "Oh, okay, I don't really understand why this is supposed to mean anything or if it's supposed to mean anything, but look at these characters you are tired of seeing, and now you get to see them and be tired of them when they were younger as well." And here's one other weird anime trope that finds its way into this final season is that I swear to God, it feels like Noah Schnapp was in the writer's room for this, and they just gave him creative license to make himself the most important and special person in this universe. And then, like, he gets so much screen time in this season, and they do so fucking little with him. It is genuinely quite astounding. Like, okay, I I kind of like what season four does with in writ large in terms of Will's sexuality, which is they don't really address it at all. They give it one little moment in that car ride where Will is very sad and you kind of acknowledge the fact that like to me that was kind of a powerful moment of just like, hey, even when you come out and accept yourself and realize who you are and stuff, like those, little queer crushes you have when you're a kid, they're probably not going to pan out and you do have to accept that. And that fucking sucks. It speaks to a genuine part of the queer experience and they just fucking shit all over it by doing this fucking thing with Robin coaching him through the entire season to get
Oh
to the
my
penultimate
God.
episode where they are literally on the threshold of a reality ending event that could kill all of them. And there's like a 15-minute long sequence where Will trips over himself to get to "I'm gay." And then event like what I love here is it cuts to a reaction shot of everyone he's talking to, and you can tell visibly the only person that is surprised is Dustin. He just goes,
Yeah.
"Oh," and everyone else is like,
It's
"We
such a funny
knew."
thing going back and watching this show from the beginning and knowing that this scene was going to come up because now every time there's any sort of reference to it at all in season one, because when you look back, it's a more like realistic portrayal of the 80s climate, even
Yeah,
because there's that scene where Joyce is like, the kids at school call him, and
yeah.
like, but it feels more natural, it feels more real, but it also doesn't feel like it's suggesting anything
No, it's
because.
like
Let me be
people
let me be
like
so
kids
for
like
real for a
Will got
second.
called fags in high school because I was a kid like Will who got called a fag in high school. Like everybody's got that experience of being 12 and you're a little bit effeminate, and regardless of whether or not you're actually queer, you're gonna get called slurs. And that was probably really rampant in the 80s, obviously. But now this Will's sexuality is planted in that one line of dialogue in season one, and then it's treated like lore that they have to fulfill the expectation of in the final
Well,
two
they
seasons.
say that they always knew that Will was gay, but they were just
Bullshit.
waiting for the right time to. Yeah, I don't believe you. I don't
Bullshit.
fucking
Don't
believe you
believe
for
it.
one second. I
Don't
don't believe
believe
you
it.
for one second. There is that one scene in season three where there's this nice little double meaning, interpret it however you want, moment where Mike says, it's not my fault you don't like girls, as a response
Yes.
to Will like wanting to stay in and play D&D with the guys. And you
Yep.
can take that however you want because there's not been that much other like context about it. Again, that season emphasizes the idea that Will is kind of in this state of arrested development, that he still wants to do the like kid stuff with his friends,
Hmm.
but they want to be like teenagers with girlfriends who are in high school now, and there's a little bit of a rift between them, but it doesn't have to be about the gay thing if you don't want it to. And honestly, I just respected it more when I didn't know if they were going to commit, because if this is
No.
what committing looks like, I don't want it.
It's like every time they addressed it, I would have been like, I kind of like how they underplayed it. It's actually quite smart, and I think that it is kind of resonant because they do leave those moments and they kind of let them hang, and the implications kind of affect you. And not to mention, we have a really sweet coming out scene in season 3 with Robin and Steve. That's an excellently handled moment. That little conversation of them two in the bathroom, that was
An
one of the most
excellently
talked
well
about
done, an
scenes.
excellent, yeah, it's an excellent arc. It's
And
wonderful.
we've
But
got
then
that little moment, and now we're making Will like this demigod who literally now has Eleven's power set. And now in the final hour, we've got to have him versus the giant fucking like kaiju. And when these characters are fighting this giant monster in this CG ass landscape, which looks measurably worse than it did in season 4, like much, much worse. Like, I mean, the color correction is visibly worse. It's kind of insane. But you've got this monster that is basically the size of an island or a small fucking continent, and you've got little tiny itty bitty 11 on the other side of the horizon line of the shot, and I'm like, remember when this show, the scariest thing was like the Demogorgon, and it was just kind of like a monster that was like 7, 8 foot tall, and it was just like, oh boy, you got to run away from it or it's gonna bite you and eat you. And now you are facing down Cthulhu, dude. What are we even like?
we have to travel through a wormhole. This is
Literally.
where the JRPG stuff comes in, right? Where it's
Oh
like we have to
yeah,
raise the stakes and
and
escalate
it's
the scale of the
like,
action. And there are moments where that works. I actually do kind of, my lizard brain that enjoys this kind of slop appreciated the fourth episode a whole lot,
oh
where it's
yeah,
just
okay,
unabashed, like Vecna tearing up shit and
yeah,
Will getting able to get back at him and that being the twist. Like
yeah.
I thought that was all pretty okay. There's actually it made my jaw drop when Vecna puts his like whole hand through that guy's face.
Oh yeah, that shit's rad. Like it's
That was
like
It was
admirably
very well
violent.
done. Yeah, yeah.
Like,
It's insane that the biggest show on television, like the first scene in season 3, you see a dude's face get melted off.
oh, it's like I admire the fact that this show has teeth throughout the entirety of it and doesn't really lose it. Even when their production values aren't great, you're still kind of like, oh wow, that was kind of fucking gnarly. And like, I mean, the intro to season 1 of that dude being lifted up in the fucking elevator is already like, oh God, that's actually like a really scary, like, and again, you think about that fucking scene and think about how small we start and how we get to the end here. And like,
Even
it's,
that scene doesn't really make sense given the context
oh
of everything
fuck
that would
no.
come
Like,
after, but
where
it's a fun introduction.
well, that's the thing, is that like it's a cinematic idea that you show something that doesn't really make sense, but is just supposed to scare you through the art of the image alone. Whereas in season 5, they are mortified to not show you every fucking square inch of this CG slop every fucking time it's on screen. There's no creative workarounds, there's no interesting angles of anything. It is clearly just put the slop on the screen, make sure everybody sees the big scary monster man, blah 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 blah. Even though we've literally been doing this since season fucking 3, and we've done this to some extent like 5 times, but what what kills me about the final confrontation of all of this, which to me is like it looked bad. I mean, the final showdown, it like the effects look like shit. It doesn't even really look as good as season 1, if I'm being perfectly honest. And if you want to build up to this absolutely fucking insane, oh, these 5 high school students or whatever are gonna be the ones that kill the giant world-ending thing. If you want to build up to do that, like, fucking like I love the Persona games. That's literally what all of them fucking do. And it's like, yeah, you're a bunch of high schoolers and then you fight God at the end. But you know what happens in between the beginning and the end? You get internal justification for why these characters can do these things, and then it makes sense when you get to the end. I don't feel like this insane spectacle shit was earned in the slightest. I don't understand how anybody is doing any of this shit, and Nancy is fucking standing there with the others, and they're just like, I know what to do, when they are looking at a monster the size of New York City, and she's like, shove some fucking rocks to hit it. And I'm just like, I don't believe that. I do not believe this. This is the best you could come up with is lure it over, shove the rocks on it, hit it, and then it's like, what? Like, you can't even do spectacle shit right anymore. At least season four did a decent job of being like, whoa, explosions, blah. Like, this is
There's cool stuff happening on the screen that makes sense that the character should be doing.
season five is it, and here's the thing is that everybody's talking about all the unresolved plot threads, and I'm going to be real with you guys. I don't give a fuck about any of them. I don't give a fuck about them answering all the things. I don't give a fuck about the Linda Hamilton shit. I don't give a fuck about any of it. I give a fuck about the in the moment stuff. I give a fuck about what the nuts and bolts of this story are. And the problem with season five isn't that it doesn't answer all your questions or that it doesn't do any of these things. The problem with season five is that it's fucking lame. It's lame. None of these people are interesting anymore. Steve and Dustin have the best chemistry of anybody in the entire cast, and they spend half of the season fucking fighting each other for stupid fucking reasons that just incorporate the guy who died in the last season and make Dustin really upset about it, even though he's been watching people die since he was like 11 years old. And I just don't buy that this one specific death of this one guy that he knew for a couple of months is going to make him be like, fuck you, Steve. Like, whatever. Sure, I guess. But none of these people are interesting at this point. Joyce and Hopper are together. I know. We've been doing this for a long time now. Mike and Elle are not actually going to be together because I mean, they've just been not doing that relationship for 5 seasons. Like they all that happens with the two of them is between seasons 2 and 3, and then the relationship doesn't exist. There is no character in season 5 at any point that does anything where I'm like, I think that's a cool direction. I think that's an interesting thing that they're doing here. It's just fucking boring.
Yeah, it's a bore. It's all a bore. It's all a bore to get to Vecnar. We gotta stop Vecnar. So
It's
we
the
spend so much
Vecna.
time with this new pack of little children that we don't care about in a
Oh God,
setting
all
that
that was
isn't
so fucking stupid. Oh Jesus.
all the Wrinkle in Time stuff. Yeah,
All
terrible.
it,
Awful.
and it's all just going back to what previous seasons have done. Like they're referencing A Wrinkle in Time because the other seasons referenced iconic pieces of media that tangentially related to the plot because we were too lazy to write our own. And it's just exhausting. Like it's so long, and my reaction is simply, and for what? Like, I genuinely think that everyone is really overthinking why this season sucks. It's because it's boring and because they didn't have a plan. They like, guys, I can't make this more evident.
They put their whole bussy into trying to figure out like what to do about the antagonists, but we're clearly just making up what to do with the characters along the way as they went along. And eventually you just run out of steam, and I just run out of being able to tolerate these characters.
And here is the great evil at the end of this is that the reason this happened to begin with, I can't even lay my blame at the Duffer Brothers. This is Netflix's fault. They changed what they originally wanted to do, and they probably would have executed that idea well. I really want to know what those other ideas that the Duffer Brothers had for other seasons of Stranger Things that weren't a continuation of season one actually were, because I bet they would have been more interesting than whatever the fuck this is. These fucking corporations and these fucking people and these fucking suits, they just hire creatives and they don't give them enough time to do anything. This has been happening since like the reason that everybody fucking hated the second season of True Detective is because they looked at Cary Fukunaga and they were like, "Hey, that season of television that was incredibly acclaimed and super popular that everybody loved and that everybody thinks is like perfect and a terrific work of art. Yeah, it took you 10 years to write that. Write season 2 in 6 months, please." What are you fucking thinking? Of course he fucking failed. Of course the Duffer Brothers failed trying to make 5 seasons worth of content off of 1 season's worth of ideas. Of course that D&D failed not adapting the end of Game of Thrones because they didn't have shit to work with. And fucking, of course, that The Rise of Skywalker was a bad fucking movie. You started a trilogy and you didn't plan on where it was gonna end. You are all so stupid. This is all your fault. It is you. It's the David Zaslavs of the world. You are ruining everything. It's your faults. All of you. If you ever wonder why this keeps happening, it's because creatives are put under stress. They're put under deadlines. And you know what? These deadlines, they're arbitrary. They don't need to make a new season of Stranger Things a year after the first one. They don't need to make 5 seasons of Stranger Things to begin with. They don't need to make Cary Fukunaga write this 6 months after the first season. They don't need any of it. They'll be fine. They're billion-dollar corporations. They've always been fine. And that, you're right, Jen. It is the evil that it sought to destroy. And that sucks. It sucks. Because we love celebrating things that are the opposite of whatever the fuck this is.
And here's the thing, is that I ultimately walk away still feeling that soft spot for Stranger Things that I've always kind of held in my heart
I
because
do.
it's still cool that a show that embraces all this weird genre stuff that wasn't as popular when we were growing up, aside from like the Saturday morning cartoon circuit, like the late 90s was a bad time to be into sci-fi and into horror.
You
And like
you had
you
the
had the prequels
X-Files
and you
and
had Lord of the
that's
Rings.
it.
Let's say you had the X-Files, you had the prequels, and you had Lord of the Rings, and that was it. That was it. There was nothing. We did not have this landscape where like
And
we're trying out so many different sci-fi, fantasy, horror
all
ideas.
all of those things too were like the stars aligned to perfectly allow the people who were showrunners or creatives on that, like Peter Jackson getting to make those 3 movies, that changed the film industry forever. The reason we have Vince Gilligan as one of the most prominent showrunners in television, he got his start on the fucking X-Files. All of these things, they if you allow them to exist, they create wonderful things. We allowed X-Files to exist in the 90s, and that's how we get Breaking Bad. That's how we get Pluribus. Doing the, like, who is going to
What does
watch the end of Stranger
Stranger
Things and be like, I want to make something like that?
say what does Stranger Things permit us to build on top of it? Probably not much. And you know what? That's fine. Nothing has to be that way, but it could have been. It could have been a vehicle for filmmakers to explore nostalgia for previous generations of work that inspires them. You know, like my season of Stranger Things, what if it's a tribute to Mad Max? Or like, what if my Stranger Things is a tribute to the Fog, or like, you know, obviously don't do Carpenter because these
Yeah.
guys are also very in love with Carpenter, but like let it be a vehicle for experimentation where instead it just becomes like it's Netflix's Harry Potter.
Do you
That's what
want
it
to
ended up
know
becoming.
the only franchise that is doing what we're saying correctly is the best horror franchise in film? It's The Evil Dead. It doesn't belong to one particular creator. They allow multiple people to come in, multiple interesting guys who get their start in like small budget horror movies. They give them a little more money than they were used to working with, and they go, here, do this. Then you get Evil Dead Rise. Then you get Evil Dead Burn, like we're going to get later this year, who both of these movies are by different directors who came from very small places. That is what you, and the best part about this, those movies make fucking money. These are successful things to do. This is not something that's like, yeah, but they'll never do it because they won't value creativity over the dollar. You can do both. You can make money and be creative. And look, I'm I might be a little particularly perturbed by this just because I was writing my own piece of Stranger Things adjacent fiction, and I've been writing it ever since and have reached an ultimate ending point soon. But like, can I just be a little petty and say that I got to Kate Bush first?
Yeah, you did.
I did, and I didn't use anything from Hounds of Love because I'm not a hack. Not to
I
say
need
that
to
Hounds of Love isn't
listen.
good.
I need to listen to Hounds of Love, and I also need to listen to Purple Rain to just like flush
Oh,
this
and there's
association out of my mind.
I had a future. There's a volume. There's a future. Those Who Dwell in the Dark one off. Like if we make it through December, that was going to be called Purple Rain, and
And
now I'm
now you
probably
can't. They,
going to
they beat
change
you.
that.
They beat you to that one.
And now I'm probably going to change
There's
that,
not
even.
even any precedent for why Purple Rain is playing in that, right? How do
And I
they?
do because Nadia has purple hair. God damn it. No, there isn't. There's like I don't even think Prince is referenced once throughout the entirety of the season. I
It's there because they like the song Purple Rain.
and Purple Rain is an amazing, perfect song, but like they're just doing it because Purple Rain sounds like an ending song. And you know what? It's a
It's the
perfect
same reason they use
microcosm.
Heroes at the end of season three,
It's
and the same reason that they use it during the credits of this.
it's because it sounds like it, even though it doesn't really mean anything. And under it all, that's what Stranger Things turned into. Something that resembles something but contains none of its meaning because it's just like something else. And it didn't have to be that. Like my memories of Stranger Things are very fond, and from the here on out, I'm just kind of gonna pretend that it ends at season three because that's just a lot easier for my brain. But it didn't have to be this way. We could have avoided this at every possible turn. And because everything in the market is where it is, because we're pursuing profit margins at all fucking cost, it just means that there is no room for anything to be made with anything that isn't expected. It's like, why do you think that film nerds latch on to foreign movies and movies that nobody sees all the time? Because these are being made without the restrictions of people over your fucking shoulder being like, this doesn't have enough needle drops. That fucking Netflix memo that leaked a couple of years ago that talked about those guys being like, well, what if the show, you gotta have more dialogue and exposition in your show so that if somebody gets up and goes to make food, they can hear what they're saying in the other room. Like the fact that that was an actual studio note, that you should read that and you should be like, I need to divest from every corporation possible. I need to go buy books. I need to go read things. I need to pay attention to independent creators. I never want to see a Disney movie ever again in my life. Like it's so slimy, and I hate that things I like and care about are being subsumed by it. It
There's
sucks.
multiple parts in this season where characters will repeat exposition that has been delivered elsewhere, just in case you forgot, because they released this in little pockets. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like,
Got to keep
after
reminding you.
in episode five, Will like repeats Vecna's entire monologue to Joyce, just in case you forgot what happened and what his plan is. But let me put a cap on this. I will always have a fond place in my heart for like what the first two seasons of this show gave me when I was like just at the right age
Yeah,
to
same.
appreciate it. Because like this really could have been my generation's Star Wars if it had turned out better.
Honestly.
And it just wasn't. And that's okay, but it sucks. So it gets a four.
Bitch.
I gave it a four. I gave it a four.
Okay. Well, then that means for this first round, we are tied.
Clean slate. All right. You go ahead. What's my good? Give me
Okay.
something, soften the blow. Give me something nice.
So
Let me get the spreadsheet pulled up.
we we visited Indiana. Mixed results is what it is. So we're gonna visit somewhere else this next week, this next episode. But it's a place we've been before. And I know right after Stranger Things, where it's obviously like echoing a bunch of stuff that we've already done and experienced and and all that stuff, it sounds kind of bad. But I do so with very specific intention. After all, this is my good recommendation, but I kind of felt bad when you when you had to watch all five fucking seasons of this
I mean, I
because
didn't
that
have to. I
well,
probably would have been just fine. I skipped season four just because I'm like, it's too long. I remember most of it, whatever.
good. Thank goodness. That makes me feel a little better. But, I did want to sort of reward you from coming out the other end. But at the same time, it is a new arc of the show, and I still want to be a little bit mean to you. But but that means that it's not really mean in the sense that I'm giving you something that you won't like. Quite the contrary. It's really more that you got to learn a lesson with some things. Some things are pieces of media that teach you something. And I think that this is going to teach you something. Because, Jen, we have to go back. We have to return to Silent Hill because
What?
you are going to experience the story of James Sunderland in the original Silent Hill 2.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh man. I knew this was coming. And
It really
I've
was.
been so excited for
I am
this.
going to be
I've been waiting for this to be like the domino push that turns me into a Silent Hill head finally.
yeah, I kind
So
of well, I mean, we got the new movie coming out and everything, but also I have not played this game since high school. So it's a good opportunity for me to revisit it as well. But this is such a foundational piece of media for so many things that has inspired so many things that we love. And also we did get the remake, and I did contemplate putting that on the table to some extent, but the original is such a guiding text for so many things. It's gotta be. It has to be this. So we will be talking about Silent Hill 2. If you need help accessing it, I have it
gotcha.
in places. It's your opportunity for revenge, Jen.
It is. It is. And
I do
so
not like how confident that was.
I've been holding something in my pocket for a while. Something that I found, something that I discovered kind of spur of the moment. I was thinking about, I had some nostalgia for the oldest stuff that we ever made together, some of the oldest stuff that we
Ooh.
ever made together. And for this arc of Jen and Jake's Bizarre Fray, I had spent a long time previously trying to do different things with our bad segments,
Mhm.
wanting to talk about things that are a little bit unexpected, a little bit out of our wheelhouse, and some things that were definitely in our wheelhouse, like the Cowboy Bebop anime.
Naturally.
Um, but this is just straightforward punishment. I'm not even gonna lie to you.
Ooh.
And it's going back to the root of my involvement on this YouTube channel. Jake, did you know that there's a new Walker Hayes album?
If this is a double album, if this is a double album, the next episode is going to begin, and I am going to be swinging from the rafters.
You are going to listen to Walker Hayes' new album, 17 Problems, which, yes, if you're wondering, does have 17 songs on it.
Oh, oh, this album cover is horrendous.
I had to
Oh,
go back. I had to go back to my first ever act of suffering that I instilled on the members of this channel.
a
And
song name dropping Johnny Cash. I hate this man. I hate this man.
my first ever trick, and turns out I can do it again.
Fancy like Applebee's.
Next time on Jen and Jake's Bizarre Affray, a trip to Silent Hill, soundtracked by Walker Hayes. Just how many problems will the boys have to overcome?
Think Jay-Z's got a few more than 99 problems. Hey, hey, hey!